Aurora's fingers trembled as she pressed them against the cold viewport, her eyes fixed on the blue-green orb growing larger by the second. Earth, the planet that would carry her when she couldn't walk. "Attention, all passengers." The captain's voice crackled through the Stardust Seeker's intercom. "We are entering Earth's solar system. Prepare for disembarkation." The young Gamelan female shifted in her hoverchair, her useless legs a stark reminder of the genetic condition that set her apart from the other 9,999 refugees on board. As Earth filled the viewport, Aurora felt a mix of hope and trepidation. This planet represented their last chance at survival after the destruction of their homeworld. The Stardust Seeker docked smoothly at the Lunar Refugee Processing Center, a gleaming testament to human engineering. As the airlocks hissed open, a flood of Gamelons surged forward, eager to begin their new lives. Aurora activated her hoverchair, ready to join them. Nothing happened. She tried again, panic rising in her throat as she realized her chair was malfunctioning. Other Gamelons streamed past, too focused on their own concerns to notice her plight. Aurora found herself stranded, unable to move, as the crowd thinned around her. "Hey there, looks like you could use a hand." Aurora's head snapped up at the unfamiliar voice. A human male stood before her, his work uniform identifying him as a technician at the processing center. Paul Rogers, his name tag read. I can't move," Aurora stammered, her voice laced with suspicion. She'd never experienced kindness from non-Gamelons before. Paul's eyes softened with understanding. "Your chair's probably not compatible with our systems. Mind if I carry you?" Aurora hesitated, her mind racing. The idea of being so vulnerable, so dependent on a stranger, a human, no less, filled her with unease. But what choice did she have? "Okay," she whispered. With gentle care, Paul lifted Aurora from her useless hoverchair. As he cradled her against his chest, she was struck by the warmth of his body, so different from the cold metal she was accustomed to. They made their way through the processing center, passing by other Gamelons who stared with a mixture of surprise and disapproval. Aurora felt her cheeks burn with shame, but also a growing curiosity about this human who'd come to her aid without hesitation. "First stop is medical screening," Paul explained as he navigated the crowded facility. "They'll do a quick health assessment, then we'll move on to housing assignments and orientation." Aurora nodded, taking in the sights and sounds of her new world. The center buzzed with activity, humans and Gamelons working side by side, processing the influx of refugees. At the medical bay, Paul carefully lowered Aurora onto an examination table. A human doctor approached, datapad in hand, ready to begin the health assessment. "I've got to report that malfunctioning hoverchair," Paul said. "Will you be okay here for a bit?" Aurora nodded, surprised to find herself reluctant to see him go. As she watched Paul's retreating back, she realized that this simple act of kindness had already begun to challenge everything she thought she knew about Earth and its inhabitants. Perhaps, she thought, this strange new world might just be the place where she could truly learn to stand on her own with a little help from unexpected friends. As the doctor approached, Aurora felt a flutter of anxiety in her stomach. She'd never been examined by a human physician before, and she wasn't sure what to expect. "Hello, Aurora. I'm Dr. Emily Allen," the doctor said, her voice warm and professional. "I'll be conducting your health assessment today. Is it all right if I ask you a few questions about your medical history?" Aurora nodded, her eyes darting around the room as she took in the unfamiliar medical equipment. Dr. Allen began her examination, her fingers gentle as she checked Aurora's vitals and ran various scans. As the doctor studied the results on her datapad, her eyebrows lifted in surprise. "Aurora, I have some unexpected news for you," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "Your condition. It's actually treatable with our medical technology here on Earth." Aurora blinked, certain she had misheard. Treatable? But How? That's impossible. Dr. Allen shook her head, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Not impossible, just previously unavailable to you. We've developed a combination of gene therapy and cybernetic enhancements that could potentially restore your ability to walk. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Aurora's mind reeled, unable to fully process what she was hearing. She'd long ago accepted her disability as a permanent part of her life. The idea that it could be changed was almost too much to comprehend. Before Aurora could formulate a response, the door slid open and Paul entered, his face flushed from exertion. "Hey, I'm back. A team of engineers is working on adapting your hoverchair to our systems," he said, then paused, noticing the tension in the room. "Is everything okay? How did the examination go?" Aurora opened her mouth to speak, but found herself at a loss for words. Dr. Allen stepped in, explaining the situation to Paul. As he listened, his eyes widened with surprise and excitement. "Aurora, this is incredible news!" Paul exclaimed. He turned to Dr. Allen, his expression determined. "How soon can we start the treatment?" The doctor's smile faded slightly. "It's not that simple, I'm afraid. There are protocols to follow, approvals to obtain. Given Aurora's status as a refugee, it could take weeks, maybe even months to get everything in order." Paul's eyes hardened in a firm line. "That's not good enough. I'm going to talk to Director Keller about this. We need to fast-track this process." Before Aurora could protest, Paul was out the door again, leaving her alone with Dr. Allen and her swirling thoughts. The doctor finished the examination in silence, occasionally glancing at Aurora with a mix of curiosity and sympathy. As Aurora was being escorted to the temporary housing area, she caught sight of Paul engaged in an intense conversation with an older man in a crisp uniform. She could only assume this was Director Keller. Paul's hands moved animatedly as he spoke, his passion evident even from a distance. The housing area was a stark contrast to the sleek medical facilities. Rows of identical prefab units stretched out before her, each one packed with Gamelin refugees. The air was thick with tension and uncertainty, punctuated by the occasional raised voice or muffled sob. A young Gamelin female approached, her eyes darting nervously between Aurora and the human escort. "You must be my new roommate," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Zira." Aurora nodded, allowing herself to be wheeled into their shared unit. The space was small and utilitarian, with 2 narrow beds and a tiny common area. Zira hovered near the door, watching as Aurora maneuvered her chair into position. "I saw you with that human earlier," Zira said, her tone guarded. "The one who carried you. Are you friends with them?" Aurora hesitated, unsure how to respond. "He helped me when my chair malfunctioned," she explained. "And the doctor. She told me something unexpected during my examination." Slowly, haltingly, Aurora recounted her experience in the medical bay. As she spoke, she saw Zira's expression shift from suspicion to disbelief, and finally to a cautious hope. Their conversation was interrupted by a crackling announcement over the intercom. "Attention all able-bodied Gamelin refugees. Please report to the main hall for a mandatory cultural orientation session." Zira stood, glancing uncertainly at Aurora. I guess I should go," she said. "Will you be okay here?" Aurora nodded, forcing a smile. "Go ahead. I'll find something to keep myself occupied." As Zira left, Aurora found herself alone in the silent unit. The weight of everything that had happened since her arrival pressed down on her. Unable to sit still, she guided her chair out of the unit and began to explore the housing area. In a secluded corner, tucked away behind the last row of units, Aurora discovered a small patch of green. It was barely more than a few square meters, but it was filled with earth plants, their leaves rustling gently in the artificial breeze of the climate control system. Aurora approached the tiny garden, her fingers reaching out to brush against a leaf. The texture was unlike anything she'd felt before, simultaneously delicate and resilient. As she sat there, surrounded by this small piece of earth, Aurora felt a sense of calm settle over her for the first time since leaving the Stardust Seeker. She didn't know what the future held, or if the promised treatment would really allow her to walk again. But in that moment, with the scent of earth plants filling her lungs, Aurora felt a spark of something she hadn't dared to feel in a long time: hope. Aurora's peaceful moment in the garden was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. She turned to see Paul jogging towards her, his face alight with excitement. "Aurora, I've been looking everywhere for you," he said, slightly out of breath. "I've got incredible news." She raised an eyebrow, curiosity piqued. "What is it?" Paul knelt beside her hoverchair, his eyes shining. "Your case has been expedited. You're scheduled for your first gene therapy treatment this morning." Aurora's heart leapt into her throat. "This morning? But how?" "Director Keller pulled some strings," Paul explained. "He believes your treatment could be a significant step forward in human-gamelan relations." As the implications sank in, Aurora felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension wash over her. She glanced down at her useless legs, then back at the tiny garden she'd discovered. I don't know what to say." Paul stood, offering her a reassuring smile. "You don't have to say anything. Let's get you to the medical facility." As they made their way through the refugee center, Aurora noticed the curious glances from both humans and gamelons. News of her impending treatment seemed to have spread quickly. Dr. Allen greeted them at the medical facility, accompanied by a team of specialists. "Good morning, Aurora," she said warmly. "Are you ready to begin?" Aurora nodded, her mouth suddenly dry. Dr. Allen led them to a private room, where she began explaining the treatment process in detail. "The therapy involves a series of injections and non-invasive procedures," Dr. Allen said, gesturing to various pieces of equipment. "It's a gradual process that will require multiple sessions over several weeks." As the medical team prepared Aurora for her first treatment, Paul stayed by her side, offering quiet words of encouragement. She felt a sharp prick as the first injection was administered, followed by a strange tingling sensation that spread through her body. The procedure lasted several hours, during which Aurora drifted in and out of consciousness. When it was finally over, she felt drained and slightly nauseous. "You did great," Paul said, helping her back into her hoverchair. "How do you feel?" "Tired," Aurora admitted, "and a little weird." Dr. Allen approached with a datapad. "That's normal. You may experience some discomfort and fatigue for the next few days. We'll monitor your progress closely." As Paul escorted Aurora back to her temporary quarters, they passed by groups of gamelons whispering among themselves. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to outright hostility. Zero was waiting when they arrived, her face a mask of concern and suspicion. "Where have you been?" she demanded. "Everyone's talking about you getting some kind of human treatment." Aurora tried to explain, but Zira cut her off. "How could you let them experiment on you like that? Don't you see what they're trying to do?" Before Aurora could respond, Zira stormed out of the unit, leaving an uncomfortable silence in her wake. Paul helped Aurora into bed, his brow furrowed with concern. "Do you want me to stay?" She shook her head. "No, I'll be all right. Thank you, Paul, for everything." As Paul left, Aurora closed her eyes, her mind swirling with the events of the day. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her as she pondered the potential consequences of her decision. The next morning, Aurora awoke to a strange sensation in her legs. At first, she thought she was imagining it, but as she focused, she realized there was a definite tingling feeling. Excitement bubbled up inside her. When Paul arrived to check on her, Aurora shared the news. His face lit up with joy. Aurora, that's amazing. We should celebrate. Is there anywhere you'd like to go? Without hesitation, Aurora knew exactly where she wanted to be. The garden, she said. Can you take me there? Paul wheeled her to the small patch of green they had discovered earlier. As they arrived, Aurora's eyes widened in surprise. The garden looked even more neglected in the harsh light of day, with wilted plants and dry soil. It needs some work, Paul observed. Maybe we could fix it up a bit? Aurora nodded enthusiastically. Yes, let's do it. Over the next few hours, Paul worked on clearing away dead plants and turning the soil while Aurora directed him from her hover chair. As they worked, a small group of gamelons gathered to watch, their expressions a mix of curiosity and disapproval. Suddenly, a tall gamelon man pushed through the crowd, his face contorted with anger. What do you think you're doing? He demanded, glaring at Aurora and Paul. Paul straightened up, wiping sweat from his brow. We're just working on the garden. Is there a problem? The man's eyes narrowed. I am Krell, and I speak for those who haven't forgotten what it means to be gamelon. You, he pointed at Aurora, are betraying your people by allowing these humans to change you. Aurora felt her cheeks burn with a mixture of shame and anger. Before she could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. That's enough, Krell. Director Marcus Keller strode towards them, his presence immediately commanding attention. He surveyed the scene, taking in the half-finished garden and the gathered crowd. Aurora's treatment in this garden project will serve as a pilot program for human gamelon cooperation, Keller announced. I'm assigning a team of both humans and gamelons to assist with the garden. This is an opportunity for us to work together and learn from each other. As Keller's words sank in, Aurora noticed the crowd's reactions. Some looked intrigued by the idea, while others, like Krell, seemed even more frustrated. She realized that her simple desire to walk again had inadvertently placed her at the center of a much larger conflict. Paul caught her eye and gave her a reassuring smile. Despite the challenges ahead, Aurora felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this garden could become more than just a patch of green. It could be the first step towards true understanding between their peoples. As the newly assigned team began to gather around them, ready to start work on the garden, Aurora couldn't help but wonder what other changes her treatment might bring, not just for her, but for all gamelons on Earth. As the weeks passed, Aurora found herself at the center of an unexpected whirlwind of activity and change. The garden project, once a small refuge, had blossomed into something far greater. Under the watchful eye of Director Keller, it had become a symbol of cooperation between humans and gamelons. Aurora watched with a mix of pride and trepidation as more people joined their efforts, transforming the neglected patch into a thriving oasis of green. Her treatment continued, bringing with it a roller coaster of sensations and emotions. The tingling in her legs intensified, sometimes accompanied by sharp pains that left her gasping. But with each session, she felt a growing connection to her lower body that she hadn't experienced in years. One morning, as Paul helped her into her hover chair, Aurora felt a twitch in her right foot. She froze, hardly daring to believe it. Paul, she whispered, I think I just moved my foot. His eyes widened, a grin spreading across his face. That's incredible, Aurora. Can you do it again? She concentrated, willing her foot to move. After a moment of intense focus, her toes curled slightly. The simple action brought tears to her eyes. Their celebration was cut short by an announcement over the intercom. Attention all residents. Please report to the main assembly hall for an important address from Director Keller. As they made their way to the hall, Aurora noticed an increased tension in the air. Humans and gamelons moved in separate groups, exchanging wary glances. The optimism of the garden project, seemed to have faded in the face of growing unrest. Director Keller stood at the podium, his expression serious. In light of recent events and the ongoing challenges we face, I am implementing a new initiative, the Cooperative Integration Program, or CIP. This program will pair humans and gamelons to work together on various projects throughout our facility. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Keller continued, "To lead this effort, I've selected 2 individuals who have already demonstrated the potential of human-gamelon cooperation. Aurora and Paul, please join me on stage." Aurora felt a jolt of surprise as all eyes turned to her. Paul gently pushed her hoverchair forward, and they made their way to the front of the hall. Keller placed a hand on Aurora's shoulder. "These 2 have shown us what we can achieve when we work together. They will oversee the CIP and help mediate any conflicts that arise." As Keller outlined the details of the program, Aurora scanned the crowd. She saw a mix of reactions: curiosity, hope, skepticism, and outright hostility. Her gaze landed on Krell, the gamelon who had confronted her in the garden. His eyes blazed with impossibly strong fury. In the days that followed, Aurora and Paul found themselves busier than ever. They worked tirelessly to implement the CIP, matching humans and gamelons based on their skills and interests. It was challenging work, fraught with misunderstandings and cultural clashes, but Aurora found it deeply rewarding. One pairing that showed particular promise was between Paul and a gamelon engineer named Krav. Initially, Krav had been openly hostile, his words dripping with disdain for humans. But as they worked together to improve the compatibility of gamelon technology with Earth systems, a grudging respect began to form. Aurora watched their progress with interest, particularly when their collaboration led to improvements in her own hoverchair. The enhanced device responded more fluidly to her commands, almost as if it could anticipate her movements. As the CIP gained momentum, Aurora's treatments entered a new phase. Dr. Allen approached her with a mix of excitement and caution. "We're ready to move forward with cybernetic enhancements," she explained. "This will help support your strengthening muscles and potentially accelerate your progress." The news spread quickly, causing a stir throughout the facility. Aurora overheard heated debates about the ethics of melding human technology with gamelon physiology. Some saw it as a promising step forward, while others viewed it as a violation of gamelon identity. The night before her first cybernetic procedure, Aurora lay awake in her bed, her mind racing. She thought about how far she had come, from a refugee with little hope to a symbol of interspecies cooperation. The weight of expectation pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Paul, his face etched with concern. "I thought you might be having trouble sleeping," he said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "How are you feeling?" Aurora took a deep breath. "Scared," she admitted. "What if something goes wrong? What if this changes me in ways I can't predict?" Paul took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together. You're not alone in this, Aurora." As dawn broke over the lunar landscape, Aurora steeled herself for the procedure that would change her life forever. She didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but she was ready to face them one step at a time. Last, she took a deep breath, steeling herself for the procedure that would change her life forever. As Aurora was wheeled into the medical bay for her cybernetic enhancement surgery, she couldn't help but notice the heightened security presence throughout the facility. The tension that had been building over the past weeks seemed to have reached a boiling point. Dr. Allen greeted her with a reassuring smile, but Aurora could see the strain in her eyes. "Are you ready, Aurora? This is a big step forward in your treatment." Aurora nodded, trying to quell the butterflies in her stomach. "As ready as I'll ever be, doctor." As the medical team prepared her for the procedure, Aurora overheard hushed conversations about increased security measures and potential threats. She caught snippets about a joint human-Gamelin security team investigating recent incidents, but before she could ask for more information, the anesthesia took effect, and she drifted into unconsciousness. When Aurora awoke, the world seemed different. Her body tingled with new sensations, and she could feel the cybernetic enhancements integrating with her nervous system. But the atmosphere in the medical bay was tense, with staff members huddled around communication terminals, speaking in urgent whispers. Paul burst into the room, his face a mix of concern and excitement. "Aurora, how are you feeling? There's so much happening." Before he could continue, Director Marcus Keller entered, his usual composed demeanor showing signs of strain. "I'm glad to see you're awake, Aurora. We need to talk." Over the next hour, Keller briefed Aurora and Paul on the unfolding situation. The security team, led by Commander John Hawkins, had uncovered evidence linking Krell to a series of sabotage incidents within the facility. Krell and his closest associates had been arrested, sparking outrage among his supporters. A group of Gamelin traditionalists is staging a protest outside the main administrative building, Keller explained. "It's escalating quickly, and we need to defuse the situation before it gets out of hand." Aurora's mind raced. Despite her recent surgery, she knew she had to act. "Let me speak to them," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "As a Gamelin who's benefited from human technology, maybe I can bridge the gap." Keller looked skeptical, but Paul nodded enthusiastically. It could work. Aurora is in a unique position to reach both sides. As they discussed the plan, Paul and Krav worked feverishly to modify Aurora's hoverchair. They integrated a personal force field generator and improved its maneuverability, providing her with greater independence and protection. Dr. Allen conducted a final check on Aurora's cybernetic enhancements, her eyes widening in surprise. "The integration is progressing much faster than we anticipated," she said. "You might even be able to attempt standing for short periods soon." This news filled Aurora with a mix of excitement and willpower. She began formulating a plan to demonstrate the potential of human-Gamelin cooperation in a powerful, visual way. As Aurora approached the makeshift podium outside the administrative building, the angry chants of the protesters filled the air. Over 1,000 Gamelons had gathered, their faces contorted with fury and fear. At the forefront stood Vex, a charismatic young Gamelin male who had taken up Krell's mantle. Paul squeezed Aurora's hand reassuringly before stepping back, allowing her to face the crowd alone. The joint security team maintained a protective perimeter, their weapons at the ready but not raised. Aurora took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. The future of human-Gamelin relations hung in the balance, and her next words could tip the scales towards cooperation or conflict. "My fellow Gamelons," she began, her voice amplified by the hoverchair speakers. "I stand before you today, or rather, I sit before you, as living proof of what we can achieve when we work together with humans." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some faces softened with curiosity, while others hardened with distrust. "I know many of you fear change," Aurora continued. "You see human technology as a threat to our way of life, but I ask you to consider another perspective." With a nod to Paul, Aurora activated the new features of her hoverchair. The force field shimmered into existence around her, drawing gasps from the crowd. She manipulated the controls with newfound precision, demonstrating the chair's enhanced capabilities. "This technology, created through human and Gamelin collaboration, has given me freedom I never thought possible," she said. "And now, I want to show you something even more incredible." Aurora's heart raced as she prepared for her boldest move yet. Slowly, carefully, she began to shift her weight in the chair. The crowd fell silent, watching in rapt attention. With tremendous effort and the support of her cybernetic enhancements, Aurora pushed herself up. For a brief moment, she stood on shaky legs, her hoverchair providing minimal support. The crowd erupted in a mix of cheers, gasps, and shocked exclamations. Even Vex, the leader of the protesters, seemed taken aback by this display. As Aurora carefully lowered herself back into the chair, she continued, "This is just the beginning of what we can achieve together. Our two species, working in harmony, can overcome challenges neither of us could face alone." The mood of the crowd began to shift. The anger and fear that had fueled the protest started to give way to curiosity and cautious optimism. Even some of Krell's staunchest supporters seemed to be reconsidering their position. But just as Aurora felt she was making progress, a commotion erupted at the back of the crowd. A group of Gamelons pushed their way forward, their faces twisted with rage. "Traitor," one of them shouted, "you've sold out your own people." The situation teetered on the edge of chaos. Aurora's heart pounded as she realized that her words alone might not be enough to prevent violence from erupting. As the angry group drew closer to the podium, she knew her next actions would be crucial in determining the fate of human-Gamelon relations. As the angry group surged forward, Aurora's mind raced, searching for a way to defuse the situation. Suddenly, she caught Paul's eye and gave a subtle nod. It was time to initiate their plan. With precision timing, Paul and Krav activated a series of modifications to Aurora's hoverchair. The force field generator hummed to life, creating a visible, shimmering bubble around her. The crowd fell silent, their attention captured by the mesmerizing display. Aurora felt a surge of energy as the chair's enhanced propulsion system engaged. Slowly, carefully, she began to rise. The cybernetic enhancements in her body worked in tandem with her strengthened muscles, providing the support she needed. Taking a deep breath, Aurora took her first tentative step forward. The crowd gasped collectively as she moved, unaided by the chair, for the first time in public. She managed several steps, her movements shaky but determined. "This," Aurora said, her voice carrying across the now silent gathering, "is what we can achieve together. Human ingenuity and Gamelon resilience, working as one." The atmosphere shifted palpably. Even the angry protesters who had pushed forward moments ago now stood in awe, their fury replaced by amazement. Director Keller, recognizing the opportunity presented by this momentous event, stepped forward. "What we've witnessed today is just the beginning," he announced. "To ensure our continued progress and address the concerns of all parties, I am forming a new joint council." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Keller explained the council structure. Equal numbers of human and Gamelon representatives, overseeing all major decisions regarding the refugee program and integration efforts. "And to demonstrate our commitment to open dialogue," Keller continued, "I invite Vex, the leader of this protest, to join this council. Your voice and the concerns of those you represent will be heard." Vex, caught off guard by the offer, stepped forward hesitantly. The crowd watched, waiting for his response. Before he could speak, however, alarms began blaring throughout the Lunar Refugee Processing Center. The piercing sound cut through the tense atmosphere, replacing the political standoff with a new, urgent energy. Commander John Hawkins rushed to Keller's side, his face grave. "Director, we received a transmission from Earth's United Defense Force. A massive, unidentified object has entered the solar system. It's heading directly for Earth." The news sent shockwaves through the assembled humans and Gamelons alike. All previous grievances seemed to fade in the face of this new, unknown threat. "Initial scans suggest it's neither human nor Gamelon in origin," Hawkins continued, his voice tight with concern. Keller's mind raced, processing the implications of this development. He turned to address the crowd, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "My fellow residents of the Lunar Refugee Processing Center, human and Gamelon alike, we face a potential threat that concerns us all. Now, more than ever, we must set aside our differences and work together." As if in response to Keller's words, another transmission came through. Admiral Horatio Nelson's voice crackled over the speakers, addressing both humans and gamelons. This is a call to all capable ships and personnel. Earth's defense fleet is mobilizing, and we request the assistance of our gamelon allies. The unknown object approaching poses a potential threat to us all. The impact of Nelson's words was immediate. Humans and gamelons who had been at odds moments ago now turned to each other, recognizing the need for unity in the face of this new danger. Director Keller, moving swiftly, began issuing orders. Activate emergency protocols. We're transforming this facility into a defensive outpost. I want human and gamelon engineers working together to upgrade our systems. As the crowd dispersed, a flurry of activity erupted across the center. Aurora, still adapting to her newfound mobility, approached Keller. Director, I want to help. I can coordinate the medical resources. Prepare for potential casualties. Keller nodded, grateful for her initiative. Thank you, Aurora. Your experience bridging our two cultures will be invaluable. As Aurora set off to begin her task, Paul caught up with her. I've been assigned to a mixed team of human and gamelon scientists, he said, excitement evident in his voice despite the tense situation. We're going to be working on integrating some advanced gamelon defense technologies into Earth systems. Aurora smiled, recognizing the potential impact of such collaboration. That's fantastic, Paul. This could be the opportunity we needed to show what we can achieve together. As they parted ways, each heading to their respective duties, Aurora couldn't help but feel a mix of apprehension and hope. The threat looming in space was terrifying. Yes, but it had accomplished in moments what weeks of careful diplomacy had struggled to achieve. True cooperation between humans and gamelons. The Lunar Refugee Processing Center transformed around her, defensive systems coming online as engineers of both species worked side by side. In the medical bay, Dr. Allen and her team were already discussing how to adapt their research on cybernetic enhancements for wider application in the coming conflict. As Aurora began organizing the medical resources, she caught sight of her reflection in a polished surface. The young gamelon who had arrived at the center, broken and hopeless, was gone. In her place stood a symbol of what could be achieved through cooperation and dedication. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Aurora knew that facing them together was their best hope for survival. Survival. The transformation of the Lunar Refugee Processing Center into a defensive outpost continued at a feverish pace, with humans and gamelons working side by side towards a common goal. As Aurora coordinated the medical resources, a priority transmission from Earth's United Defense Force cut through the din of activity. Director Keller's voice rang out over the facility's speakers. Attention all personnel. We received new information about the approaching object. It's been classified as a massive biological entity and dubbed Behemoth by Earth's defense forces. The news sent shockwaves through the center. Aurora exchanged a worried glance with Paul, who had just returned from his engineering assignment. Before they could discuss the implications, another announcement followed. In light of this development, Keller continued, Admiral Horatio Nelson has established a war council. I've been appointed as the lunar base representative. Aurora, Paul, and Krav report to my office immediately. We're departing for Earth. Aurora's heart raced as she made her way to Keller's office, her hoverchair gliding smoothly through the bustling corridors. She found Paul and Krav already there, their faces a mix of anticipation and concern. You three will accompany me as advisors, Keller explained, his voice taut with urgency. Your unique perspectives and the example of your cooperation will be invaluable to the War Council. Within the hour, they boarded a high-speed shuttle bound for Earth. As the lunar base shrank behind them, Aurora couldn't help but feel a pang of anxiety. She had never been to Earth, and now she was heading there under the most dire circumstances imaginable. The journey was tense and quiet, each passenger lost in their own thoughts. Paul occasionally squeezed Aurora's hand, offering silent support. As they approached Earth's orbital defense station, the magnitude of the situation became clear. The station buzzed with activity, ships of both human and gamelan design darting about in complex patterns. Upon docking, they were immediately ushered into a briefing room. Fleet Admiral Zhang Wei, a stern-faced woman with piercing eyes, stood at the head of a large holographic display. "Welcome to Earth Orbital Command," Zhang said, her voice crisp and authoritative. "I'll bring you up to speed quickly. The behemoth is unlike anything we've encountered before." The holographic display flickered to life, showing a massive, amorphous entity. Its surface roiled and shifted, defying easy classification. Long-range scans indicate it's composed of a highly adaptive organic material, Zhang continued. It's capable of withstanding extreme conditions in space, and its size. She paused, allowing the implications to sink in. It dwarfs our largest ships. Aurora felt a chill run down her spine as she gazed at the holographic representation. The sheer scale of the threat was almost beyond comprehension. As the briefing continued, an unexpected voice cut through the tension. Krell, the former leader of the anti-human faction, was brought in under guard. Despite the circumstances, he stood tall, his eyes scanning the room before settling on Aurora. "I may have information that could help," Krell said, his voice steady. "Gamelan bioweapon technology might be effective against this entity." The room erupted into a flurry of activity as Krell's insights were combined with Earth's cybernetic expertise. Aurora watched in amazement as human and gamelan scientists worked together, their previous animosities forgotten in the face of this common threat. Within hours, a new weapon system began to take shape. Codenamed Nemesis, it was designed to be mounted on Earth's most advanced warships. The system utilized a combination of targeted electromagnetic pulses and engineered bioagents, aimed at disrupting the behemoth's cellular structure. As the day wore on, Aurora found herself in the thick of the planning and preparations. Her unique position as a gamelan beneficiary of human technology made her an invaluable intermediary between the two species. The arrival of Dr. Emily Allen from the lunar base brought another breakthrough. She burst into the War Council chamber, her eyes bright with excitement despite her obvious exhaustion. "We've done it," she announced, holding up a small, intricate device. "We've successfully miniaturized the cybernetic enhancements used in Aurora's treatment. We're calling them augment modules." The implications were immediately clear to everyone in the room. With these modules, they could quickly enhance the capabilities of key personnel in the defense force. Before anyone else could speak, Aurora raised her voice. "I volunteer," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I'll undergo additional enhancements to test more advanced modules." Paul started to protest, concern etched on his face, but Aurora silenced him with a look. "This is my choice," she said softly. "It's my way of giving back, of fighting for both our peoples." As the War Council approved the emergency protocol to begin augmenting Defense Force personnel, Aurora prepared herself for the next phase of her transformation. She knew the risks, but as she looked around at the united efforts of humans and gamelons, she felt a surge of hope. The behemoth might be approaching, but they would face it together. As Aurora was led away to begin her additional enhancements, she caught Paul's "I won last time." In that moment, she saw not just concern, but pride and admiration. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew they would face them as one. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew they would face them as partners, united in purpose. As Aurora underwent her additional enhancements, alarms blared throughout the orbital command station. The behemoth had entered the outer reaches of the solar system, triggering a flurry of activity across the combined human and gamelan forces. Admiral Zhang Wei's voice rang out over the intercom, "All personnel to battle stations. First line of defense, move into position near Neptune's orbit." Paul rushed to the command center, his heart racing. He found Krav already there, poring over holographic displays of the approaching entity. The behemoth loomed large on the screens, its massive form defying easy categorization. "Status report," Jean demanded, her eyes fixed on the main display. A young officer, her fingers flying over a control panel, responded. "The first wave of our defense fleet is in position, Admiral. Nemesis weapon systems are online and ready." Zhang nodded, her face a mask of concentration. "Initiate long-range sensor sweeps. I want detailed data on that thing's structure and movement patterns." As the sensors began their work, Aurora entered the command center. Paul's breath caught in his throat. Her new enhancements were subtle but evident. Her movements more fluid, her eyes gleaming with an intensity that spoke of heightened perception. "Aurora," he said, relief evident in his voice. "How do you feel?" She smiled, a hint of steel in her expression. "Better, stronger, ready to face this threat." Before Paul could respond, the sensor data began streaming in. Krav's eyes widened as he analyzed the information. "This is unexpected," he muttered. "Report," Zhang barked. Krav looked up, his voice tight with urgency. "The behemoth. It's not a single organism. It's a collective, comprised of smaller biomechanical units working in unison." The implications of this discovery rippled through the command center. Zhang turned to her communications officer. "Relay this information to the fleet. Have them adjust the Nemesis targeting systems for precision strikes on the subcomponents." As the orders were relayed, the first wave of Earth's defense fleet engaged the behemoth. The command center erupted into a cacophony of tactical updates and status reports. Gamelin shields holding steady. Earth vessels executing evasive maneuvers. Nemesis weapons showing initial success. Outer layer disruption confirmed. Paul watched in awe as the battle unfolded on the main display. The human-Gamelin collaboration was proving its worth. Earth's ships, now protected by Gamelin shield technology, weathered the behemoth's initial assaults. Meanwhile, the augmented crews piloted their vessels with uncanny precision, weaving between the entity's massive tendrils. But the behemoth was far from defeated. With each successful hit from the Nemesis weapons, the entity's outer layers seemed to ripple and reform. "It's adapting," Aurora observed, her enhanced senses allowing her to pick up on subtle patterns in the behemoth's behavior. "Each attack is becoming less effective." Zhang's expression resolute. "We need to keep adjusting our tactics. Krav, work with the weapons team to modulate the Nemesis frequencies. We can't let that thing outpace us." As Krav set to work, a transmission came through from the lunar base. Commander John Hawkins appeared on a secondary screen, his face etched with grit. "Orbital Command, this is Lunar Base. We're ready to activate the gravitational array." Zhang nodded. "Proceed, Commander. Let's see what this joint project of ours can do." On the main display, a series of energy beams shot out from the lunar surface, converging in space. The fabric of space-time seemed to warp and twist, creating localized gravity wells in the behemoth's path. The effect was immediate. The entity's advance slowed, its massive form struggling against the artificial gravitational fields. Parts of its structure began to warp and stretch, the increased gravitational forces disrupting its internal cohesion. "It's working," Paul exclaimed, hope rising in his chest. But their elation was short-lived. The behemoth, displaying an alarming level of intelligence, began to fragment. Smaller units broke away from the main mass, maneuvering around the gravity wells with surprising agility. Zhang's eyes narrowed. "It's learning, adapting. We need more options." She turned to Aurora. "You've undergone the latest enhancements. What's your assessment?" Aurora closed her eyes, interfacing directly with the command center systems through her new neural implants. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of processed data and enhanced analysis. The behemoth's adaptive capabilities are outpacing our current weapons and tactics. We need a more dynamic approach. She opened her eyes, meeting Zhang's gaze. Dr. Allen's team on Earth, they're working on an advanced neural interface for controlling nanobot swarms. It could be our best chance at combating the behemoth on a cellular level. Zhang considered this for a moment, then nodded. Make the call. We need every advantage we can get. As Paul relayed the order to expedite Dr. Allen's research, another transmission came through. It was Vex, his face alight with excitement despite the grim circumstances. Admiral Zhang, I've uncovered something in ancient Gamelin legends. There are references to a celestial entity known as the World Eater, and an artifact called the Harmony Core that was used to repel it. This could be the key to defeating the behemoth. The command center fell silent as the implications of this information sank in. Zhang's mind raced, weighing the potential of this new lead against the immediate threat they faced. We can't ignore this, she said finally. Krell, I'm assigning you to lead a covert team. Your mission is to locate this Harmony Core. We'll transmit the details shortly. As Krell acknowledged the order, Zhang turned back to the main display. The battle raged on, Earth's combined forces holding their ground, but slowly being pushed back towards the inner solar system. Fall back to secondary positions, Zhang ordered. Activate all remaining defensive measures. We need to buy time for these new initiatives to bear fruit. As the defense fleet regrouped, the gravity array on the lunar base intensified its output, creating a complex web of spatial distortions. The behemoth's advance slowed further, its massive form twisting and warping as it navigated the treacherous space. In the command center, Aurora, Paul, and Krav worked tirelessly, coordinating the defense efforts and analyzing every scrap of data for potential weaknesses in the behemoth structure. The fate of Earth, of both humanity and the Gamelin refugees, hung in the balance. As the battle entered its critical phase, Aurora felt a surge of grit. They had come so far, overcome so much. Now, with humans and Gamelon standing united, she knew they had a fighting chance against this cosmic threat. The behemoth loomed ever closer, its massive form filling the view screens. But even as it advanced, new possibilities were unfolding. Dr. Allen's nanobot research, the search for the Harmony Core, and the continued refinement of their integrated technologies. Aurora exchanged a glance with Paul, seeing her own mix of fear and hope reflected in his eyes. Whatever came next, they would face it together, two species united against a common foe. Threat. As the command center bustled with activity, Dr. Emily Allen's voice crackled over the comms. We're ready for the neural interface procedure, Admiral, she announced. It's risky, but it's our best shot at giving Aurora control over the nanobot swarms. Zhang Wei's eyes locked onto Aurora. It's your call, Lieutenant. Are you prepared for this? Aurora nodded, her face set with grim dedication. I am, Admiral. Let's do this. Minutes later, Aurora lay on an operating table in the medical bay, surrounded by a team of human and Gamelin specialists. Dr. Allen stood at her head, carefully maneuvering a delicate array of neural connectors. Remember, Dr. Allen said softly, once the interface is active, you'll be connected directly to the nanobot swarms. It will feel overwhelming at first, but try to focus on your training. Aurora closed her eyes as the interface activated, her body tensed, back arching as her mind exploded with new sensations. Millions of microscopic perspectives flooded her consciousness, each nanobot a tiny extension of her will. In the command center, Paul watched Aurora's vital signs on a monitor, his knuckles tightening as he gripped the edge of the console. Suddenly, Aurora's eyes snapped open on the video feed, glowing with an eerie internal light. Neural interface stable, Dr. Allen reported. Aurora, can you hear me? Aurora's voice came through the speakers, altered and layered with harmonic overtones. "I can hear you, Doctor, and I can see everything." As Aurora acclimated to her new abilities, alarms blared throughout the station. The behemoth had broken through the secondary defensive line, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. "We've lost the Ankara and the Zhukov," an officer reported, his voice tight with tension. "Gamelin Cruiser Talon is reporting heavy damage." Admiral Zhang's face hardened. "Order all remaining ships to fall back to Mars orbit. We'll make our stand there." On the main view screen, the massive form of the behemoth loomed ever closer, its surface rippling and shifting as it easily shrugged off attacks from the Nemesis weapon system. "The entity is adapting faster than we can adjust our weapons," Krav reported, frustration evident in his voice. Zhang turned to the communication officer. "Any word from Krell's team?" "They've reached the Gamelin colony and are searching for the Harmony Core now, Admiral." As if on cue, Krell's face appeared on a side screen. Behind him, strange glyphs and pulsing energy fields were visible in what appeared to be an ancient facility. "We've found it," Krell announced, holding up a small, crystalline object that seemed to glow from within. "Transmitting data now." Zhang nodded. "Excellent work. Get that artifact back here as fast as you can." She turned to Paul. "Commander, I need you to lead a team on reverse engineering this Harmony Core. If it can disrupt the behemoth's collective consciousness, it might be our last hope." Paul hesitated, glancing at the monitor showing Aurora in the medical bay. Zhang placed a hand on his shoulder. "She's fighting her battle. Now you need to fight yours." With a quick nod, Paul gathered a team of engineers and set to work, poring over the data streaming in from Krell's team. Meanwhile, Aurora, now fully connected to the nanobot swarms, engaged the behemoth directly. Her consciousness expanded across space, guiding millions of tiny machines in complex attack patterns. Multiple breaches detected in the behemoth's outer layer, an analyst reported. The nanobots are penetrating its cellular structure. For a moment, it seemed as though they might have turned the tide. But the behemoth's adaptive abilities proved formidable. New defenses began to form, neutralizing swaths of nanobots. In the medical bay, Aurora's body convulsed, blood trickling from her nose. "Her neural patterns are destabilizing," Dr. Allen warned. "We can't maintain this connection much longer." On the lunar base, Commander John Hawkins watched the battle unfold with growing desperation. "We're out of options," he muttered, then keyed his calm. Admiral Zhang, requesting permission to activate the gravity array at full power. "Granted, Commander. Give us everything you've got." Massive generators beneath the lunar surface hummed to life. Space itself seemed to warp and twist as colossal gravitational forces were brought to bear on the behemoth. The entity's advance slowed, its form stretching and distorting under the intense gravitational stress. "It's working," Krav exclaimed. "The behemoth's internal cohesion is breaking down." But their celebration was short-lived. Long-range sensors began blaring new warnings. "Admiral," a sensor operator called out, her voice trembling. "We're detecting a second entity entering the system. It's another behemoth." A hush fell over the command center as the implications sank in. They were now facing a war on two fronts, with their forces already stretched to the breaking point. In the engineering lab, Paul's team worked feverishly to adapt Earth's orbital platforms to emit an energy signature similar to the Harmony Core. "We're close," Paul muttered, his eyes bloodshot from hours of non-stop work. "Just a few more calibrations." Suddenly, a new alert flashed across the screens. Unknown vessels had appeared in the outer system, pursuing Krell's ship as it raced back with the Harmony Core. Admiral Zhang's voice cut through the chaos. "Dispatch a task force to ensure Krell's safe return. We need that artifact." As orders were relayed and ships scrambled to new positions, heated arguments broke out among the war council members. Some advocated for a scorched earth policy, proposing the use of weapons of mass destruction to deny the behemoth access to Earth's resources. "We can't sacrifice everything we've fought to protect," a Gamlan representative argued. "And what will be left to protect if those things reach Earth?" A human counselor shot back. Amidst the growing discord, Aurora pushed her neural interface to its absolute limits. Her consciousness delved deeper into the behemoth's structure, searching for any weakness they could exploit. "I see it," she gasped, her voice barely audible over the medical alarms. "There's a pattern, a vulnerability in it." Aurora's words cut off as her body went limp, the neural interface overloading her enhanced systems. As medics rushed to stabilize Aurora, the twin behemoths continued their inexorable advance towards Earth. The combined human and Gamlan forces regrouped around Mars, preparing for what might be their final stand. In the command center, Admiral Zhang surveyed the holographic display of the solar system, watching as the massive entities closed in from opposite directions. She took a deep breath, steadying herself for the decisions that lay ahead. "All ships, battle stations," she ordered, her voice calm despite the dire circumstances. "This is the moment that will define both our species. Together, we make our stand." As the order echoed across the fleet, the first shots of the climactic battle began to fire. The fate of Earth, the Gamlan refugees, and perhaps the entire solar system now hung in the balance, with victory balanced on a nice edge. The fate of Earth, the Gamlan refugees, and perhaps the entire solar system now hung in the balance, with victory balanced on a knife's edge. As the first salvos of the climactic battle erupted across space, Admiral Zhang's voice cut through the chaos. "All ships, implement Operation Harmony Grid. Deploy modified orbital platforms now." The order set off a flurry of activity. Massive orbital defense platforms, their systems humming with the reverse-engineered Harmony Core technology, began to unfold around Earth. As they activated, a shimmering energy field enveloped the planet, pulsing with an otherworldly glow. On the main view screen, the twin behemoths loomed ever closer, their massive forms distorting as they pushed through the gravitational anomalies generated by the lunar base. Commander Hawkins' voice crackled over the comms. "Lunar gravity array at maximum output, Admiral. We can't sustain this level for long." Zhang nodded grimly. "Understood, Commander. Hold as long as you can." Suddenly, a new alert blared through the command center. "Multiple contacts detected near Mars orbit," an officer reported. "It's Krell's team, and they're under heavy fire." The view screen shifted, revealing a chaotic scene near the Red Planet. Krell's ship, carrying the precious Harmony Core, weaved through a hail of energy blasts. The unknown vessels pursuing them moved with unnatural precision, their sleek forms unlike anything in Earth's database. "You are urquan scouts," Krov said, his voice tight. "I've seen their kind before. They're after the core." Zhang's mind raced, weighing options. "Commander Hawkins, can you extend the gravity array's range?" A moment of silence, then Hawkins replied, "It's risky, but yes." "What do you have in mind?" "Create a spatial distortion between Mars and Earth. Give Krell an escape route." As Hawkins acknowledged the order, Zhang turned to Paul. "Status on the weapon integration?" Paul looked up from his console, exhaustion etched on his face. "We've done it, Admiral. The Harmony Core's energy signature has been successfully merged with our existing systems. The first prototypes are being loaded onto our ships now." A cheer went up through the command center, quickly stifled as everyone remembered the gravity of their situation. Zhang allowed herself a small smile. "Excellent work, Commander. Now let's put it to use." She opened a channel to the fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Zhang. We're implementing a split offensive. Task Force Alpha will engage the behemoth approaching from the outer system. Task Force Beta, focus on the inner system threat. Concentrate fire on the weak points identified in Aurora's reconnaissance. As the fleet divided and moved into position, Zhang's thoughts turned to Aurora. The young lieutenant's sacrifice had given them this chance, but at what cost? In the medical bay, Dr. Emily Allen worked feverishly over Aurora's still form. Gamelin and human medical experts crowded around, their hands flying over instruments and holographic displays. Her cybernetic systems are completely overloaded, Allen muttered, her brow furrowed in concentration. We need to stabilize the neural pathways before they degrade beyond repair. A Gamelin specialist looked up from a complex bioscanner. Doctor, what if we integrated some of our biotech with her existing enhancements? It could provide the stability her system needs. Allen's eyes widened. That could work. Let's do it. As the medical team fought to save Aurora, the battle outside reached a fever pitch. The modified Earth ships unleashed their new hybrid weapons, lances of energy infused with the Harmony Core's unique signature streaking across space to impact the behemoths. For a moment, it seemed to be working. The cosmic entity's outer layers rippled and distorted where the weapons struck. But then, with horrifying speed, the behemoths began to adapt. They're generating some kind of energy field, Krav reported, his voice tight with frustration. It's neutralizing our attacks. Zhang gritted her teeth. Keep firing. We need to buy time for Krell to deliver the core. Near Mars, Krell's ship emerged from the spatial distortion created by the lunar base's gravity array. The pursuing urquan ships, caught off guard by the maneuver, scattered in confusion. We're clear. Krell's voice came through, strained but triumphant. ETA to Earth orbit, 20 minutes. As Krell's ship raced towards Earth, the urquan fleet suddenly changed course. Instead of pursuing the Harmony Core, they turned to engage the behemoths. Admiral, Paul called out, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The urquan ships, they're attacking both behemoths. Zhang watched in astonishment as the advanced alien vessels unleashed weapons of incredible power against the cosmic entities. The behemoths' progress slowed, their massive forms twisting under the combined assault of Earth's forces and the unexpected urquan intervention. This is our chance, Zhang said, her mind racing. Regroup our forces. Coordinate our attacks with the urquan. If we can't beat these things alone, maybe we can do it together. As the battle lines shifted, a weak voice came through on the medical bay's comm channel. Admiral, Zhang. Zhang's heart leapt. Aurora? How? No time, Aurora interrupted, her voice growing stronger. I can see them clearly now. The behemoths. They have a central nexus, a point where their consciousness converges. If we can disrupt that. Understood, Zhang replied. Reste now, lieutenant. You've done more than enough. As Aurora slipped back into unconsciousness, Zhang turned to her command staff. You heard her. Find those nexus points. Every ship with hybrid weapons, prepare to concentrate fire on my mark. The combined Earth-Gamelin fleet, now fighting alongside the mysterious urquan, regrouped for a final, desperate assault. As Krell's ship entered Earth orbit with the Harmony Core, and Aurora's enhanced abilities provided the key to the behemoth's vulnerability, the fate of the solar system hung in the balance. The final phase of the battle was about to begin. The combined forces of Earth, Gamelin, and the unexpected urquan allies unleashed a barrage of firepower against the twin behemoths, their weapons leaving luminous trails across the void of space. Amidst the chaos, a familiar voice crackled over the command center's comm system. Admiral Zhang, this is Aurora. I'm fully operational and ready to assist. Zhang's eyes widened in surprise. Lieutenant, are you sure you're... There's no time, Admiral, Aurora interrupted, her voice steady and determined. I'm interfacing with the nanobot defense system now. We have one shot at this. In a specialized control chamber aboard the orbital command station, Aurora sat encased in a web of neural interfaces and holographic displays. Her eyes darted rapidly behind closed lids as she processed vast streams of data, her enhanced mind reaching out to coordinate the swarms of nanobots with unparalleled precision. Incredible, Paul muttered, watching the tactical displays. She's identifying structural weaknesses we couldn't even detect before. As Aurora directed the nanobot swarms with surgical accuracy, Krell's ship docked with the orbital defense grid. His team rushed to unload the Harmony core, passing it carefully to Paul's waiting engineers. Let's hope this works, Paul said, his fingers flying over the control panel as they integrated the artifact into Earth's defense systems. A low hum filled the air, building to a crescendo as the Harmony core came online. Suddenly, a shimmering energy field burst forth from the orbital platforms, enveloping the Earth in a protective cocoon of pulsating light. The effect on the behemoths was immediate and startling. Their massive forms seemed to shudder and twist, their coordinated movements becoming erratic and disjointed. Now's our chance, Admiral Zhang called out. All ships, concentrate fire on the weak points Aurora has identified. The combined fleet surged forward, their weapons now augmented by the Harmony core's energy signature. Lances of hybrid energy sliced through the behemoth's outer layers, penetrating deeper than ever before. As the battle raged, a transmission came through from Mars. Vex's face appeared on the main view screen, his expression a mix of excitement and urgency. Admiral, we've made a critical discovery in the ruins. A portable version of the Harmony core. We believe it could be used to deliver a knockout blow directly to a behemoth central nexus. Zhang's mind raced, quickly formulating a plan. Understood, Vex. Transmit all data immediately. Before she could issue further orders, Admiral Horatio Nelson stepped forward. I volunteer to lead the infiltration team, Admiral Zhang. We'll take a stealth ship and deliver that device right into the belly of the beast. Zhang nodded, recognizing the gravity of the moment. Godspeed, Admiral Nelson. We'll create a diversion to cover your approach. As Nelson's team prepared for their daring mission, a new communication channel opened. A striking alien visage filled the screen. Supreme Commander Xurzha of the urquan. Humans of Earth. Xurzha's deep, resonant voice filled the command center. We have hunted these behemoths across the stars for eons. We offer you our knowledge, our weapons, but we require something in return. The Harmony core technology and a permanent alliance with your worlds. A tense silence fell over the command center. Director Marcus Keller was the first to speak. We need their expertise, Admiral. The behemoths are unlike anything we've faced before. Commander John Hawkins countered, his voice tight with concern. And what happens when this battle is over? Can we trust them with such power? Before the debate could escalate further, Aurora's strained voice cut through the comms. Admiral, I've created a breach in the nearest behemoth's outer layer. It's a small window, but it should be enough for Nelson's team to enter. Dr. Emily Allen's worried face appeared on a separate screen. Admiral Zhang, Aurora's neural patterns are becoming dangerously unstable. If she maintains this level of interface much longer, the damage could be permanent. Zhang clenched her fists, the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. The fate of Earth, perhaps the entire solar system, now rested on a series of critical decisions. Accept the urquan alliance and gain their invaluable knowledge, or risk facing the behemoths alone. Launch Nelson's high-risk infiltration mission, or search for a safer alternative. And how long could they push Aurora's enhanced abilities before the cost became too high? As Zhang opened her mouth to give her next order, the battle around them intensified. The behemoths, despite their disorientation, began to adapt to the Harmony Core's effects. Their massive forms twisted in space, bringing new defenses to bear against the combined fleet. Nelson's infiltration team rocketed towards the breach Aurora had created, their stealth ship a barely visible blur against the backdrop of the cosmic battle. The portable Harmony Core device pulsed with energy in the ship's hold, a beacon of hope in the face of overwhelming odds. Aurora's voice came through once more, now barely above a whisper. "Admiral, I can't maintain much longer." The command center erupted into a flurry of activity as Zhang prepared to make decisions that would shape the future of humanity and its newfound allies. The battle had reached its tipping point, and the next few moments would determine whether Earth would stand or fall before the cosmic threat of the behemoths. Behemoth's threat. As the command center erupted into frenzied debate, Admiral Horatio Nelson's voice cut through the chaos. "There's no time to waste. I'm proceeding with the infiltration mission." Zhang nodded, her expression grim. "Understood, Admiral. We'll cover your approach." Nelson strode purposefully towards a hangar bay, his team of elite soldiers, both human and Gamelin, falling in line behind him. They boarded the specially modified stealth ship, christened Trojan Horse, its sleek design belying its deadly purpose. Meanwhile, Director Marcus Keller stepped forward, his teeth clenched. "Supreme Commander Xerza, we accept your offer of alliance. Earth needs your expertise to combat this threat." The urquan leader's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "A wise decision, Director. Transmitting behemoth schematics now." As detailed holographic images filled the command center screens, Paul's eyes widened. These reveal critical vulnerabilities we never knew existed. With this information, we can modify the portable Harmony Core to target their central nervous systems directly. Zhang turned to Paul. "Make it happen, Commander. Every second counts." Paul nodded, his fingers flying over the console as he initiated the modifications. "We're calling it the Behemoth Buster. It should be ready by the time Nelson's team reaches their target." In the medical bay, Aurora's body convulsed as she maintained her neural link with the nanobot swarms. Dr. Emily Allen's voice cracked with concern as she addressed the command center. "Admiral, Aurora's neural patterns are degrading rapidly. We need to pull her out now." But Aurora's weak voice interrupted. "No, I can hold on. The mission needs me." Dr. Allen's face tightened with worry as she prepared a syringe filled with an experimental nanoregenerative cocktail. "This might buy us some time, but it's a risky gamble." Back in the hangar, Nelson's team finished their final equipment checks. The Admiral addressed his squad, a mix of grit and gravity in his voice. "We're about to enter the belly of the beast. Stay focused, stay alive, and remember, the fate of Earth rests on our shoulders." The Trojan Horse's engines hummed to life as it launched from the orbital station. Aurora's nanobot swarms had created a temporary breach in the nearest behemoth's outer layer, and Nelson piloted the stealth ship towards the opening with precision. As they penetrated the massive entity's biomechanical structure, the interior revealed itself, a maze of pulsating, organic corridors that seemed to breathe with malevolent life. Nelson's voice crackled over the team's comm units. "urquan schematics are accurate so far. Aurora, can you give us a sitrep on internal defenses?" Aurora's strained voice came through, each word a battle against her failing systems. "Nanobot. Reconnaissance shows minimal resistance in your immediate vicinity, but be cautious. Deeper levels. More active." The team moved swiftly through the twisting passageways, their footsteps muffled by the soft, spongy surface beneath them. Tendrils of bioluminescent material cast an eerie glow, creating shifting shadows that played tricks on their eyes. Outside, Commander John Hawkins orchestrated a series of diversionary attacks. The combined human Gamelin urquan fleet executed complex maneuvers, utilizing the lunar base's gravity anomalies to gain tactical advantages. Beams of energy crisscrossed space, impacting against the behemoth's massive forms. As Nelson's team pushed deeper into the creature's core, they encountered their first sign of resistance. Swarms of antibody-like constructs materialized from the walls, their metallic bodies glinting in the dim light. "Contact!" shouted Zorn, a Gamelin soldier at the front of the formation. He opened fire with a specialized weapon designed to combat the behemoth's internal defenses. The air filled with the screeching of dying antibody constructs and the acrid smell of burnt biomatter. The team fought their way through increasingly dense waves of internal defenses. Nelson's voice rang out over the chaos. "Push forward. We're nearing the central nervous system." Suddenly, a massive tendril burst through a nearby wall, sweeping several team members off their feet. Zorn leapt into action, firing a concentrated burst at the base of the tendril. "Admiral, go! I'll hold them off." Nelson hesitated for a split second before nodding grimly. "Your sacrifice won't be in vain, soldier." He pressed forward with the remaining team members as Zorn's battle cries echoed behind him. In the orbital command station, Aurora's body went rigid. Her eyes flew open unseeing as a seizure racked her frame. Dr. Allen's voice filled with panic. "We're losing her. Aurora's consciousness is slipping." Paul's head snapped up from his console. "The nanobot swarms. They're destabilizing." He quickly initiated emergency protocols, his fingers dancing across the controls. "I'm taking over coordination, but I can't match Aurora's level of control." As Paul struggled to maintain the nanobot defenses, Nelson and his team finally reached the behemoth's central core. The chamber pulsed with otherworldly energy, tendrils of light weaving through the air around them. Nelson hefted the behemoth buster, its surface humming with barely suppressed power. "This is it, team. Cover me while I plant the device." As Nelson worked to activate the behemoth buster, the creature's internal defenses redoubled their efforts. The team fought desperately, their weapons creating a protective ring of fire around the Admiral. With a final twist, Nelson armed the device. "Buster is hot. Fall back to extraction point." The behemoth buster began to emit powerful energy pulses, disrupting the entity's collective consciousness. The entire structure around them shuddered and convulsed. As Nelson's team fought their way back through the writhing corridors, the second behemoth broke off its attack on Earth, sensing its companion's distress. It turned, its massive form moving with surprising speed towards its stricken counterpart. In the command center, Zhang watched the tactical display with growing concern. "The second behemoth is disengaging. This changes everything." Keller's voice was tense as he addressed the War Council. "We need to decide now. Do we press our advantage against the weakened behemoth, or recall Nelson's team and prepare for the second entity's approach?" As the debate raged, Nelson's voice crackled through the comms, filled with static and the sounds of ongoing battle. "Admiral Zhang, we're nearing the extraction point, but resistance is heavy. Request immediate evac and fire support." Zhang's eyes narrowed as she weighed her options, the fate of Earth hanging in the balance. The battle had entered a crucial phase, with victory tantalizingly close, yet still fraught with peril. She opened her mouth to give the order that would shape the course of the war. Zhang's decision came swiftly, her voice cutting through the chaos of the command center. "Admiral Nelson, hold your position. We're sending support immediately." She turned to her tactical officers. "Redirect a third of our fleet to provide cover fire for the Trojan horse. The rest will maintain pressure on the weakened behemoth." As the orders were relayed, the massive form of the first behemoth began to convulse violently. The behemoth buster's energy pulses disrupted its collective consciousness, causing it to lose coordination over its vast body. The creature's movements became erratic, its attacks unfocused and diminished in power. Inside the behemoth, Nelson and his team fought a desperate retreat through its organic corridors. The walls pulsated with angry red bioluminescence, and waves of antibody-like constructs swarmed towards them from every direction. "Keep moving," Nelson shouted, his voice barely audible over the screeching of dying constructs and the thunderous convulsions of the behemoth's body. "The exit point is just ahead." As they rounded a corner, they saw the breach where they had entered, now partially closed and guarded by a mass of writhing tendrils. Nelson activated his comm unit. "This is Nelson. We need immediate fire support at the extraction point." In the orbital command station, Paul's fingers flew across his console, sweat beading on his forehead as he struggled to maintain control over the nanobot swarms. The lack of Aurora's neural interface resulted in jerky, uncoordinated movements of the defensive screen. Dr. Allen watched the monitors displaying Aurora's vital signs with growing concern. She turned to her medical team, her voice tight with urgency. "Prepare the neural enhancers and stimulants. We're bringing her back online." As the medical team worked feverishly, alarms blared across the command center. Zhang's eyes widened as she watched the tactical display. "The second behemoth is changing course," she announced. "It's abandoning its attack on our defensive lines and moving to assist its companion." Keller's face paled. "If they combine forces, we'll lose our advantage." Zhang nodded grimly. "Agreed. Commander Hawkins, activate the lunar defense platforms. We need to slow that second behemoth down." On the lunar base, Hawkins input a series of complex commands. Hidden doors in the moon's craters slid open, revealing rows of sleek, menacing weapon platforms. "Lunar defenses online," Hawkins reported. "Firing graviton torpedoes now." The weapons launched, their energy trails crisscrossing the void of space. Where they impacted the behemoths, localized areas of intense gravitational distortion formed, warping the space around the massive entities and disrupting their movements. Back in the medical bay, Aurora's eyes snapped open, her body arching off the bed as the neural enhancers took effect. She gasped, her mind immediately reconnecting with the nanobot swarms. The protective screen around Earth's forces snapped back into focus, its movements once again precise and coordinated. "Aurora's back online," Dr. Allen reported, her voice a mix of relief and worry. "But we can't maintain this level of neural activity for long without risking permanent damage." Zhang acknowledged the warning with a nod. "Understood. Aurora, focus on creating an exit path for Nelson's team. We need them out of there now." Inside the first behemoth, Nelson and his team had reached the partially closed breach. The organic material around it pulsated, trying to seal the opening. As they approached, a swarm of nanobots materialized, forming a protective barrier around them. "This is our chance," Nelson shouted. "Move, move, move." The team charged forward, their weapons blazing as they cleared a path through the last of the internal defenses. They burst out of the behemoth's body into the cold vacuum of space, the Trojan horse waiting for them just beyond the breach. As they boarded their ship, the second behemoth loomed closer, its massive form casting a shadow over the battlefield. The urquan fleet, led by Supreme Commander Xurza, moved to intercept, their advanced weapons flaring to life. Zhang watched the unfolding battle with growing concern. "The urquan weapons are effective, but at what cost?" she murmured. "We still know so little about their true capabilities." As if in answer to her concerns, long-range sensors began picking up new signals. Keller leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied the data. "We've got more incoming objects," he announced. "But these aren't behemoths or urquan ships." "Another threat?" Zhang asked, her voice tense. Keller shook his head, his expression a mix of confusion and excitement. "I don't think so. Based on what we've learned from Vex discoveries on Mars, These could be remnants of the ancient Gamelin fleet. The command center erupted into a flurry of activity as they scrambled to process this new development. Zhang turned to her communications officer. "Contact Admiral Nelson. We need that data from the behemoth's interior. It might be our best chance to end this fight before those new arrivals complicate things further." As the battle raged on multiple fronts, the Trojan horse limped away from the convulsing behemoth, its hull scorched and damaged. Inside, Nelson worked to transmit the vital data they had gathered, knowing that the information could be the key to humanity's survival. The War Council faced a series of critical decisions: how to allocate their forces between the weakened behemoths and the approaching unknowns, how much to trust and rely on the urquan allies, and what to make of the possible Gamelin fleet entering the fray. As Zhang prepared to address these questions, the battle entered a new phase. The fate of Earth, the Gamelin refugees, and perhaps the entire solar system hung in the balance. The next few hours would determine not just the outcome of this conflict, but the future of interspecies relations and the balance of power in the galaxy. Solar system hung in the balance. The next few hours would determine not just the outcome of this conflict, but the future of interspecies relations and the balance of power in the galaxy. As if on cue, long-range sensors lit up with new contacts. The command center erupted into a flurry of activity as technicians scrambled to identify the approaching vessels. Director Keller leaned forward, his eyes scanning the incoming data. "These markings, they're similar to ancient Gamelin designs," he announced, his voice tinged with excitement and disbelief. Before anyone could react, a transmission cut through the chaos. A deep, authoritative voice filled the command center. "This is Admiral Zorthak of the Gamelin Ancestral Fleet. We have detected the behemoth threat and offer our assistance." Zhang and Keller exchanged stunned glances. The Gamelin Ancestral Fleet, long thought to be a myth, had returned from their centuries-long journey through deep space. Without hesitation, Zhang opened a channel. "Admiral Zorthak, this is Admiral Zhang Wei of Earth's Defense Force. Your arrival is most welcome. We're transmitting tactical data now." As the new allies integrated into the battle plan, Zhang quickly reorganized Earth's defense strategy. She divided the combined forces into 3 task forces, her voice sharp and clear as she issued orders. Task Force Alpha will continue the assault on the weakened behemoth. Task Force Beta, engage the second entity. Task Force Gamma, coordinate with the Ancestral Fleet for a flanking maneuver. In the midst of the reorganization, a distress call crackled through the comms. Admiral Nelson's voice, strained and urgent, cut through the static. "Command, this is Nelson. The Trojan horse is caught between the behemoths. We can't make it back to safety." Zhang's mind raced, calculating options. Before she could respond, Nelson continued, "We're going to use our remaining power to approach the second behemoth. We'll deploy a modified behemoth buster. It's our best shot at replicating our earlier success." "Understood, Admiral," Zhang replied, her tone grim. "We'll provide whatever support we can." In the orbital command station, Aurora's body convulsed as she pushed her enhanced abilities to their limit. Blood trickled from her nose and ears as she extended her control over the nanobot swarms, creating a protective corridor for Nelson's approach. Dr. Allen moved to intervene, but Aurora's voice, strained yet determined, stopped her. "I can do this. They need me." Paul, witnessing Aurora's struggle, sprung into action. He turned to the engineering team, his voice urgent. "We need to boost power to the neural interface. Now!" As engineers scrambled to reroute power, the battle outside intensified. The urquan fleet unleashed a barrage of energy weapons that pierced through the behemoth's outer layers. The raw power of their attack was awe-inspiring and terrifying in equal measure. Commander Hawkins' voice cut through the comms from the lunar base. "Activating Phase 2 of lunar defenses. Railguns online and firing. Massive projectiles streaked across space, their impacts creating shockwaves that visibly disrupted the behemoth's regenerative abilities. Amidst the chaos, a new voice joined the command channel. "This is Krell. I volunteer for a mission to the ancestral fleet. My knowledge of gambling technology could help unlock their full potential." Zhang looked to Keller, who nodded his approval. "Mission authorized, Krell. Prepare for immediate extraction to the ancestral fleet's command ship." As Krell's transport launched, Nelson's team successfully penetrated the outer layer of the second behemoth. The Trojan horse's hull groaned under the strain as organic tendrils lashed out, seeking to crush the intruder. Inside the behemoth, Nelson led his team through pulsating corridors. The internal defenses were even more vicious than before, with swarms of construct antibodies materializing from the very walls. "Push through," Nelson shouted over the screeching of dying constructs. "We need to reach the central nervous system." Outside, the combined fleet pressed its attack. Earth fighters darted between the lumbering behemoths, their weapons blazing. Gamelin cruisers unleashed salvos of energy torpedoes, while urquan dreadnoughts fired weapons that warped the very fabric of space-time. The ancestral fleet moved into position, their sleek ships gliding with impossible grace. As they engaged, their weapons revealed technology far beyond anything seen before. Beams of pure energy lanced out, carving through the behemoth's outer layers with surgical precision. In the command center, Zhang watched the battle unfold, her mind racing to process the rapidly changing situation. The addition of the ancestral fleet had shifted the odds, but the behemoth's raw power and regenerative abilities still made them formidable opponents. As Nelson's team pushed deeper into the second behemoth, and Krell made his way to the ancestral fleet's command ship, Zhang knew that the next few minutes would be crucial. The fate of Earth, the Gamelin refugees, and perhaps the entire solar system hung in the balance, with multiple critical missions underway that could turn the tide of the battle. The space around Earth had become a chaotic battlefield, filled with energy weapons, graviton torpedoes, and swarms of fighter craft. Amidst the storm of destruction, humanity and its allies fought not just for survival, but for a future free from the behemoth threat. As the battle raged across the void of space, Admiral Nelson and his team found themselves deep within the pulsating corridors of the second behemoth. The organic walls writhed around them, construct antibodies materializing in ever-increasing numbers. "Push forward," Nelson shouted, his voice barely audible over the screeching of dying constructs. "We need to reach the central nervous system." The team advanced, their weapons blazing, carving a path through the entity's internal defenses. With each step, the resistance grew fiercer, a clear sign they were approaching something vital. Outside, Aurora's body convulsed violently as she pushed her abilities beyond their limits. Blood now flowed freely from her nose and ears, her neural implants glowing an angry red. Paul barked orders to the engineering team, his voice tight with urgency. "Reroute all available power to the neural interface. We need to stabilize her connection." As engineers scrambled to comply, the battle outside intensified. The combined fleet pressed its attack, Earth fighters darting between the lumbering behemoths, while Gamelin cruisers unleashed salvos of energy torpedoes. The urquan dreadnoughts fired weapons that warped the fabric of space-time itself, creating localized areas of distortion that tore at the behemoth's outer layers. Aboard the ancestral fleet's command ship, Krell worked feverishly alongside Admiral Zorthak. His fingers flew across alien control surfaces, integrating modern Gamelin technology with the ancient systems. "There!" Krell exclaimed, his eyes wide with excitement. "We've done it!" Admiral Zorthak nodded, his weathered face set in unyielding commitment. "All ships, activate the immobilization field." A shimmering energy barrier sprang to life around sections of the behemoths, temporarily halting their regenerative abilities and creating vulnerable points in their defenses. Supreme Commander Xurza the urquan seized the opportunity. His fleet executed a series of precise strikes against the weakened first behemoth, targeting the areas disrupted by the initial behemoth buster device. The entity's biomechanical structure began to buckle under the assault, great fissures opening across its surface. In the orbital command station, Director Keller received an urgent transmission from Earth. Dr. Emily Allen's face appeared on the screen, her expression a mix of excitement and concern. "Director, we've made a breakthrough," she reported. "The nanobot technology in Aurora's enhancements is exhibiting unexpected properties when exposed to behemoth material. We might have a new weapon, but we need Aurora's direct involvement to develop it." Keller's brow furrowed as he weighed the implications. Before he could respond, Admiral Zhang Wei's voice cut through the comms. "All ships, prepare for a concentrated assault on the second behemoth's outer layer," Zhang ordered. "We're going to create a breach large enough for a mass deployment of our smaller vessels." Earth's remaining fleet surged forward, weapons blazing. The space around the second behemoth erupted in a storm of energy beams, missiles, and graviton torpedoes. Slowly but surely, a massive wound began to open in the entity's hide. Inside the behemoth, Nelson's team fought through increasingly dense internal defenses. They suffered casualties, good men and women falling to the relentless onslaught of construct antibodies. Yet they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that failure meant the end of everything they held dear. As they pushed deeper into the entity, they entered a vast chamber unlike anything they had encountered before. Pulsating tendrils of biomechanical matter crisscrossed the space, forming a complex, three-dimensional web. "This is it," Nelson breathed, his eyes wide. "The behemoth's central nervous system." The team spread out, setting up defensive positions as Nelson began to arm the modified behemoth buster. The device hummed to life, its energy signature causing the surrounding tendrils to writhe in agitation. Outside, Aurora's efforts to maintain the protective nanobot corridor for Nelson's team reached a critical point. Her body arched off the medical bed, cybernetic implants sparking dangerously. "We're losing her." Dr. Allen's voice crackled over the comms. "Admiral Zhang, we need to make a decision. Do we pull her out to pursue this new weapon, or maintain our current strategy?" Zhang's face was a mask of concentration as he assessed the rapidly evolving situation. The first behemoth was on the verge of destruction, while Earth's fleet was making progress in breaching the second entity's defenses. Yet the potential of a new, game-changing weapon couldn't be ignored. As Zhang opened his mouth to give the order, a massive tremor shook the command center. The tactical display lit up with new warnings as the second behemoth began to shift its massive bulk, responding to the threat within its very core. The battle had reached its zenith, with multiple critical events converging at once. Nelson's team stood ready to deploy their weapon. Earth's fleet pressed its advantage against the behemoth's outer layer, and the combined forces of humanity's allies continued their relentless assault. The next few moments would determine the fate of the solar system, as the cosmic struggle between life and the behemoth threat reached its climax. As the second behemoth began to shift its massive bulk, the battle reached a fever pitch. Inside the entity's central nervous system chamber, Admiral Nelson and his team found themselves facing an unexpected challenge. The biomechanical tendrils that crisscrossed the space reacted violently to their presence, lashing out with increasing ferocity. "Take cover," Nelson shouted as a particularly large tendril whipped towards them. The team scattered, diving behind pulsating organic structures for protection. Assessing the situation quickly, Nelson made a difficult decision. "We need to split up," he ordered, his voice firm despite the chaos around them. "Johnson, Garcia, you're with me. The rest of you, find alternative routes to the core. We'll rendezvous there." As the team separated, Nelson and his two remaining companions pushed forward with the modified behemoth buster. They navigated through a maze of writhing tendrils, their progress slowed by the need to constantly dodge and weave. Meanwhile, in the orbital command station, Aurora's condition was rapidly deteriorating. Her body convulsed violently, cybernetic implants sparking dangerously as she struggled to maintain the protective nanobot corridor for Nelson's team. Paul watched in horror as visible burns began to appear on Aurora's skin, her implants overheating from the immense strain. He knew he had to act fast. "I'm sorry, Aurora," he whispered, his fingers flying across the control panel. With a heavy heart, he initiated the override sequence, forcibly disconnecting Aurora from the neural interface. Aurora's body went limp as the connection was severed, her labored breathing the only sign of life. Paul breathed a sigh of relief, knowing he had saved her from permanent neural damage. However, the victory was bittersweet. Nelson's team was now without their protective shield. On Earth's surface, Dr. Emily Allen worked feverishly in a hastily assembled laboratory. Around her, a mixed team of Gamlan and human scientists moved with urgent purpose, their efforts focused on developing the newly discovered nanoweapon. "We need to stabilize the molecular structure," Allen called out, her eyes fixed on a holographic display of the nanobot schematics. "Varzov, can you adjust the quantum resonance?" The Gamlan scientist nodded, his long fingers dancing across an alien interface. Outside the lab, the sounds of the ongoing global evacuation filtered through, a constant reminder of the stakes they faced. In lunar orbit, Commander John Hawkins stood before a massive control panel, his face illuminated by the glow of dozens of screens. With a deep breath, he initiated the activation sequence for the lunar base's energy projectors. "Energy projectors online," he announced over the comms. "Firing now." Powerful beams of exotic particles lanced out from the lunar surface, striking both behemoths simultaneously. The effects were immediate and dramatic. The entity's biomechanical structures visibly distorted, ripples of disruption spreading across their massive forms. However, the immense power draw quickly began to strain the moon's power grid. Warning lights flashed across Hawkins' control panel. "Initiate rolling blackouts across all non-essential systems," he ordered, his voice tense. "We need to keep these projectors online at all costs." In space, Admiral Zhang Wei watched with grim satisfaction as her daring maneuver paid off. A swarm of smaller ships, led by a mixed squadron of human and Gamlan pilots, successfully breached the second behemoth outer layer. "All ships, engage internal defense mechanisms," Zhang commanded. "Create as much chaos as you can. We need to buy Admiral Nelson's team more time." The interior of the behemoth became a storm of energy weapons and explosions as the small ships engaged the entity's internal defenses. This diversion allowed Nelson's team to advance deeper into the creature, though their progress remained perilous. Aboard the Ancestral Fleet's command ship, Krell worked alongside Admiral Zorthak, his expertise guiding the deployment of their advanced energy field technology. Massive sections of both behemoths were immobilized, providing a crucial advantage to the attacking forces. However, the strain on the ancient vessels was evident. Several ships in the Ancestral Fleet began to show signs of instability, their hulls crackling with excess energy. "We can't maintain this level of output for much longer," Zorthak warned, his weathered face creased with concern. Krell nodded grimly, his fingers never ceasing their dance across the alien controls. "We just need to hold out a little longer," he replied, willpower evident in his voice. As the battle raged on, Supreme Commander Xurzov the urquan seized the opportunity presented by the weakened state of the first behemoth. His voice rang out across the urquan fleet's communication channels. "All ships, concentrate fire on the exposed core," he ordered. "This is our chance to end this threat once and for all." The urquan fleet responded with a devastating barrage of firepower. The combined assault proved too much for the already damaged behemoth. With a series of catastrophic explosions, the massive entity began to break apart. The death throes of the first behemoth sent massive shockwaves through space, buffeting nearby ships and complicating the ongoing attack on the second entity. Pilots struggled to maintain control of their vessels as the shockwaves washed over them. Amidst the chaos, long-range sensors on the orbital command station detected a new anomaly forming at the edge of the solar system. Director Marcus Keller studied the incoming data with growing concern. "This can't be good," he muttered, his fingers flying across a keyboard as he ran multiple analyses. As the results came in, his face paled. "Admiral Zhang," he called over the comms, "we have a new problem. The behemoth's presence appears to have triggered a localized space-time distortion. If my calculations are correct, this could draw more entities like the behemoths into our solar system." The implications of this new threat hung heavy in the air as the battle continued to rage. The combined forces of humanity and its allies pressed their advantage, knowing that victory was tantalizingly close, yet still fraught with peril. The fate of Earth and the entire solar system hung in the balance as multiple critical missions converged towards a climactic resolution. Inside the second behemoth, Admiral Nelson and his two remaining team members finally reached what appeared to be the creature's core. The chamber pulsed with an otherworldly energy, biomechanical structures intertwining in complex patterns around a central nexus. As Nelson began to set up the behemoth buster device, he encountered an unexpected obstacle. A shimmering field of energy surrounded the core, unlike anything they had seen before. "It's some kind of adaptive defense," Nelson muttered, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Johnson, run a spectral analysis. Garcia, keep watch for any internal defenses." As they worked to overcome this final hurdle, the battle outside intensified. The second behemoth, fighting for its very survival, unleashed a new form of attack. Pulses of energy began to emanate from the entity, interfering with the neural implants of augmented soldiers and disrupting the control systems of nearby ships. In the orbital command station, Paul faced a heart-wrenching decision: to counter the behemoth's new attack and provide crucial support to Nelson's team. He needed to reactivate Aurora's neural interface. The risks were enormous, potentially fatal for Aurora, but the fate of the mission, and perhaps humanity itself, hung in the balance. Paul's hand hovered over the activation switch, the weight of his choice pressing down on him like a physical force. In that moment, as the battle raged across the void of space and within the depths of the behemoth, the future of Earth and its allies hinged on the actions of those fighting on multiple fronts against an enemy that threatened to overwhelm them all. As Paul's hand hovered over the activation switch, a surge of dedication coursed through him. With a deep breath, he pressed a button, reactivating Aurora's neural interface. Aurora's eyes snapped open, her body arching off the medical bed as her consciousness was thrust back into the chaotic data stream. The influx of information threatened to overwhelm her, but something unexpected happened. Her cybernetic implants, pushed beyond their design limits, began to integrate more deeply with her biological systems. "Aurora," Paul called out, rushing to her side. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes, now glowing with an ethereal light, focused on him. I can see everything," she gasped, her voice filled with wonder and pain. "The behemoth, our ships, the nanobots. It's all connected." As Aurora's enhanced consciousness expanded, she became aware of Admiral Nelson's predicament inside the second behemoth. The energy field protecting the core pulsed rhythmically, its pattern complex yet not impenetrable. Inside the behemoth, Nelson's mind raced as he analyzed the shimmering barrier before them. Years of tactical experience coalesced into a moment of clarity. "Johnson, Garcia," he barked, "set your charges to detonate on my mark. We're going to synchronize with the field's energy pulses." The team worked swiftly, placing their remaining explosives at key points around the chamber. Nelson's eyes never left the pulsating field, his internal clock ticking in time with its fluctuations. "Now!" he shouted. The charges detonated in perfect sequence, creating a cascading wave of energy that momentarily disrupted the protective field. Nelson seized the opportunity, rushing forward with the Behemoth Buster device in his arms. As he placed the device at the heart of the entity's central nervous system, a surge of biomechanical energy coursed through the chamber. Nelson gritted his teeth, fighting against the pull of the energy as he activated the device. "It's done!" he gasped into his calm. "Everyone out now." Back on the orbital station, Aurora's body temperature began to rise dramatically as her newly integrated systems worked overtime to process the flood of data. Paul watched in horror as visible heat waves shimmered around her body. "Aurora, your core temperature is approaching critical levels," he warned, his voice tight with concern. "We need to shut down the interface." "No," Aurora replied, her voice strained but resolute. "I can handle it. We're so close." At that moment, Dr. Emily Allen's voice crackled over the comm system. "Orbital station, this is Dr. Allen. We've done it. The nano-weapon prototype is complete. Transmitting blueprints now." Paul's eyes widened as he saw the incoming data. "Aurora, are you seeing this?" Aurora nodded, her eyes unfocused as she absorbed the information. "I can control them," she whispered. "The nanobots, the new weapon. I can make them work together." In lunar orbit, Commander John Hawkins frowned at the readings on his control panel. The space-time distortion at the edge of the solar system was growing more unstable by the second. "Divert all power from non-essential systems to the energy projectors," he ordered. "We need to contain that anomaly at all costs." The lunar surface lit up as the energy projectors fired at full capacity, their beams lancing out into space towards the growing rift. In the void between Earth and the second behemoth, Admiral Zhang Wei orchestrated a complex dance of ships and firepower. The ancestral fleet's energy fields created weak points in the behemoth outer layer, which Earth and Gamelin vessels immediately exploited with precision strikes. "All ships, concentrate fire on grid sectors 7 through 12, Zhang commanded. "Drive your attacks deep into the entity's structure." As the combined fleet pressed its advantage, the urquan ships under Supreme Commander Xurza executed a daring maneuver. They formed a tight ring around the behemoth's midsection, their advanced weapons creating a band of destructive energy that severed the entity's ability to regenerate its lower half. Inside the behemoth, Nelson and his team raced through rapidly deteriorating corridors, the entity's internal structure buckling under the combined assault from within and without. "Move it, people!" Nelson shouted as a massive tendril crashed down behind them. "We're not out of this yet." As they fought their way towards their extraction point, Aurora's enhanced consciousness reached out to them. Through her connection to the nanobot swarms, she began to clear a path, disintegrating obstacles and creating safe passages through the chaos. On the Ancestral Fleet's command ship, Admiral Zorthak and Krell exchanged a grim look. "We have no choice," Zorthak said solemnly. "Initiate the singularity generation sequence." Krell nodded, his fingers dancing across the alien controls. As the ancient Gamelin ships moved into position, he opened a channel to Earth's War Council. "This is Krell of the Ancestral Fleet," he transmitted. "We are attempting to close the space-time rift with a controlled singularity. Be advised, the consequences of this action are uncertain." As the battle reached its zenith, a new horror emerged. The space-time distortion flared violently, and from its depths, a third behemoth began to materialize. "New contact," shouted a sensor operator on the orbital station. Massive entity emerging from the rift, bearing directly for Earth. The already strained defense forces now faced an impossible dilemma. They had to destroy the second behemoth quickly, support the Ancestral Fleet's attempt to close the rift, and somehow muster a defense against this new, terrifying threat. In the heart of the chaos, Aurora pushed her enhanced abilities to their absolute limit. Swarms of weaponized nanobots streamed from her control, slipping through the breaches in the second behemoth's defenses and beginning to break down its biomechanical structure from within. As cascading failures spread throughout the entity's systems, Nelson and his team finally reached their extraction point. The battle was just getting started, but the tide had begun to turn. The combined forces of Earth and its allies now faced their greatest challenge yet, with the fate of the entire solar system hanging in the balance. Balance. As Paul's fingers hovered over the activation switch, Aurora's eyes snapped open, her body arching off the medical bed as her consciousness was thrust back into the chaotic data stream. "Aurora," Paul called out, rushing to her side. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes, now glowing with an ethereal light, focused on him. I can see everything," she gasped, her voice filled with wonder and pain. "The behemoth, our ships, the nanobots. It's all connected." As Aurora's enhanced consciousness expanded, she became acutely aware of Admiral Nelson's predicament inside the second behemoth. Her newly integrated systems worked overtime to process the flood of data, causing her body temperature to rise dramatically. Paul watched in horror as visible heat waves shimmered around her body. "Aurora, your core temperature is approaching critical levels," he warned, his voice tight with concern. "We need to shut down the interface." "No," Aurora replied, her voice strained but resolute. "I can handle it. We're so close." Inside the behemoth, Nelson and his team reached the entity's core. The chamber pulsed with otherworldly energy, biomechanical structures intertwining in complex patterns around a central nexus. Nelson's eyes never left the pulsating field as he placed the charges. "Now!" he shouted. The charges detonated in perfect sequence, creating a cascading wave of energy that momentarily disrupted the protective field. Nelson seized the opportunity, rushing forward with the Behemoth Buster device in his arms. As he placed the device at the heart of the entity's central nervous system, a surge of biomechanical energy coursed through the chamber. Nelson gritted his teeth, fighting against the pull of the energy as he activated the device. "It's done," he gasped into his calm. "Everyone out now." The Behemoth Buster began to emit powerful disruptive pulses, causing widespread system failures throughout the creature's biomechanical structure. Nelson and his remaining team members immediately initiated their escape plan, navigating through rapidly deteriorating internal corridors as the creature's body began to break down around them. Aurora, now fully integrated with both the nanobot swarms and Dr. Allen's experimental nanoweapon, pushed her enhanced abilities to their absolute limit. Her body temperature continued to rise dangerously as she directed swarms of weaponized nanobots into the behemoth through breaches in its outer layer. The nanobots worked in tandem with the Behemoth Buster, accelerating the entity's structural breakdown from within. On the orbital command station, Paul monitored Aurora's vital signs with growing concern. He implemented emergency cooling protocols, flooding Aurora's control chamber with cryogenic gases in an attempt to stabilize her condition. Despite the extreme measures, Aurora refused to disengage, knowing that her continued efforts were crucial to the mission's success. In space, the combined fleet pressed its advantage against the weakening second behemoth. Admiral Zhang Wei coordinated a series of precision strikes targeting the weak points created by the urquan energy ring. Earth and Gamelin ships unleashed a barrage of advanced weaponry, further compromising the behemoth's structural integrity. As the second behemoth began to show signs of imminent collapse, attention shifted to the new threat emerging from the space-time rift. The third behemoth, now halfway materialized, accelerated its entry into the solar system. Its partial form demonstrated an unsettling ability to phase in and out of normal space, making it an even more challenging target than its predecessors. Commander John Hawkins, recognizing the urgent need to contain this new threat, redirected the lunar base's energy projectors towards the rift. The intense beams of exotic particles interacted with the distorted space-time fabric, temporarily slowing the third behemoth's emergence, but placing immense strain on the moon's power systems. The ancestral fleet, under the command of Admiral Zorthak and guided by Krell's expertise, initiated its plan to generate a controlled singularity. 3 of the ancient Gamelin ships moved into a triangular formation around the rift, their advanced systems working in harmony to manipulate the fabric of space-time. As the ships began to generate the singularity, they experienced severe structural stress, with warning alarms blaring throughout their hulls. Supreme Commander Xurza, assessing the situation, made a tactical decision. He ordered a portion of the urquan fleet to break off from the attack on the second behemoth and engage the emerging third entity. The urquan ships unleashed a new weapon, a form of energy that seemed to disrupt the third behemoth's ability to phase between states, forcing it to fully materialize. As these events unfolded, Dr. Emily Allen's team on Earth completed a critical upgrade to the nano-weapon prototype. They managed to enhance its effectiveness against the behemoth's regenerative capabilities. Allen immediately transmitted the upgrade data to the orbital station, where Paul began the delicate process of integrating it into Aurora's neural interface. The second behemoth, now in its death throes, unleashed a final, desperate attack. It released a massive burst of bioelectric energy that overloaded the systems of nearby ships and threatened to disrupt the ancestral fleet's singularity generation process. Admiral Zhang Wei quickly ordered all non-essential vessels to fall back, creating a buffer zone around the collapsing entity. Inside the disintegrating behemoth, Admiral Nelson's team encountered a new obstacle. The creature's internal structure had become so unstable that their planned escape route was no longer viable. Nelson made a bold decision, leading his team towards one of the breach points created by the fleet's external assault. He contacted the command station, requesting immediate extraction under heavy fire. "Control, this is Nelson," he barked into his comm, ducking as a massive tendril crashed down nearby. "Our primary exit is gone. We're heading for breach point Alpha 7. We need immediate extraction." As Nelson's team fought their way towards the behemoth's outer layer, Aurora detected their movement through her nanobot swarms. Despite her critically elevated body temperature and the strain on her neural interface, she redirected a portion of the nanobots to clear a path for Nelson's escape. This action created a visible tunnel through the behemoth's deteriorating flesh, guiding Nelson's team towards safety. "There!" Nelson shouted, pointing to the shimmering path of nanobots. "That's our way out. Move!" The team sprinted through the disintegrating corridors, their path illuminated by the swirling nanobots. Behind them, entire sections of the behemoth collapsed, sending shockwaves through the creature's dying body. In space, the battle intensified as the combined fleet now faced both the collapsing second behemoth and the emerging third entity. The ancestral fleet singularity began to form, creating a swirling vortex of energy near the space-time rift. The gravitational forces generated by this process started to pull on all nearby objects, including the third behemoth and parts of the disintegrating second entity. As the singularity grew in strength, Krell's voice crackled over the comms, strained but determined. "The singularity is becoming unstable. We can't maintain control for much longer." Admiral Zorthak's response was immediate. "All ships, prepare for emergency maneuvers. We may need to break formation at a moment's notice." The space around the rift began to warp and distort, the fabric of reality itself seeming to bend under the immense gravitational forces. The third behemoth, now fully materialized, struggled against the pull of the singularity, its massive form twisting in ways that defied natural physics. Back on the orbital station, Paul worked feverishly to integrate Dr. Allen's nanoweapon upgrade into Aurora's neural interface. Aurora's body convulsed as the new data flooded her system, her eyes glowing even brighter than before. "Aurora, talk to me," Paul urged, his hands flying over the control panel. "What's happening?" Aurora's voice came out as a whisper, filled with awe and terror. "I can see it all. The nanobots, the behemoths, the very fabric of space-time. It's too much." As Aurora fought to maintain control of her enhanced abilities, Nelson's team finally reached the outer layer of the second behemoth. They could see the void of space through the creature's deteriorating flesh, punctuated by flashes of weapons fire from the ongoing battle. "This is it," Nelson shouted. "Prepare for space exposure. On my mark. We make a break for it and pray our extraction team is in position." The team readied themselves, checking their suits one last time as the behemoth's flesh pulsed and writhed around them. Nelson raised his hand, ready to give the signal that would propel them into the chaos of the space battle raging just beyond. Beyond, Nelson took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "Mark!" he shouted, and as one, the team launched themselves through the disintegrating flesh of the behemoth and into the vacuum of space. The sudden transition from the chaotic internal environment of the behemoth to the vast expanse of space was jarring. Nelson's team found themselves thrust into a battlefield unlike anything they had ever experienced. The void around them was filled with the flashes of weapons fire, the burning debris of destroyed ships, and the looming presence of the third behemoth partially emerging from the space-time rift. As they floated in space, surrounded by the remnants of the dying second behemoth, Nelson's comm crackled to life. "Admiral Nelson, this is Captain Zev of the Gamelin vessel Starfire. We've detected your emergence and are moving to extract. Hold position and prepare for pickup." Nelson signaled his acknowledgement, then turned to his team. "Stay close and watch for debris," he ordered, his voice tense as he surveyed the dangerous field of wreckage surrounding them. The Starfire appeared through the chaos, its sleek form weaving between chunks of behemoth biomatter and scattered pieces of destroyed ships. As it approached, the vessel's shield generators flared to life, creating a protective corridor extending from its hull. "Now!" Nelson shouted, activating his suit's maneuvering thrusters. His team followed suit, propelling themselves towards the safety of the Gamelin ship's shields. As they traversed the gap between the disintegrating behemoth and the Starfire, a massive tremor shook the dying entity behind them. Nelson glanced back to see huge sections of the creature's body breaking apart, releasing a final burst of bioelectric energy. "Incoming EMP," he warned, but it was too late. The pulse washed over them, momentarily disrupting their suit systems. Nelson felt his maneuvering thrusters sputter and die, leaving him drifting helplessly in space. Around him, he could see his team members similarly affected, their trajectories thrown off course. Captain Zev, recognizing the danger, took swift action. The Starfire's tractor beams activated, locking onto Nelson and his team. With careful precision, the Gamelin ship reeled them in, pulling them to safety just as another wave of debris from the collapsing behemoth swept through the area they had occupied moments before. As Nelson's feet touched the deck of the Starfire's airlock, he let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Thank you, Captain," he said as the inner doors opened, revealing Captain Zev and his crew. Zev nodded grimly. "We're not out of this yet, Admiral. The battle's just getting started." On the orbital command station, Paul watched in growing alarm as Aurora's vital signs continued to spiral out of control. Despite the cryogenic cooling measures, her body temperature refused to stabilize. What was more concerning, however, were the readings from her neural interface. "This can't be right," Paul muttered, his fingers flying over the control panel as he double-checked the data. But there was no mistake. Aurora's cybernetic systems were showing signs of fusion with her biological components, a process that should have been impossible. Inside the control chamber, Aurora's body arched off the medical bed, her skin taking on an almost metallic sheen. Her eyes, still glowing with that eerie light, snapped open. "Paul!" she gasped, her voice sounding simultaneously pained and exhilarated. Something's happening to me. I can feel everything. Paul's concern deepened as he noticed the way the nanobots around Aurora seemed to respond to her mere thoughts, moving with an efficiency and coordination he had never seen before. Aurora, your systems are showing signs of fusion. We need to shut down the interface before. No, Aurora interrupted, her voice firm despite the strain. I can handle it. We're so close to stopping the behemoths. I can't stop now. In space, the battle raged on with renewed intensity. Admiral Zhang Wei coordinated Earth and Gamelin ships in a complex series of maneuvers, focusing their attacks on the weakest points of the second behemoth structure. The creature's massive form writhed in its death throes, each movement sending shockwaves through space that threatened to destabilize nearby ships. The urquan fleet, under Supreme Commander Xurzaw's command, maintained their energy ring around the entity's midsection. The pulsing barrier of exotic particles prevented any attempt at regeneration, ensuring that every blow struck by the Allied forces brought the behemoth closer to its demise. As the second behemoth neared its end, attention shifted to the emerging threat of the third entity. Half materialized, it phased in and out of normal space, presenting a nightmarish target for the fleet's weapons. Conventional attacks passed harmlessly through its shifting form, leaving no damage. Supreme Commander Xurzaw's voice cut through the comm channels. All ships, prepare to deploy phase-lock torpedoes. Target the areas of highest material density. The urquan ships moved into formation, their weapons bays opening to reveal a new type of missile. As one, they launched a barrage of the phase-lock torpedoes. The projectiles streaked across space, detonating in a series of brilliant flashes around the third behemoth. Where the torpedoes exploded, space itself seemed to stabilize. The behemoth's form solidified in those areas, unable to shift back into its phase state. The effect was localized and temporary, but it provided the opening the fleet needed. All ships, concentrate fire on the stabilized sections. Admiral Zhang Wei ordered. The combined fleet unleashed a devastating barrage, their weapons finally finding purchase on the behemoth's partially materialized form. The creature reeled under the assault, its otherworldly scream reverberating through space. On the lunar base, Commander John Hawkins faced a critical decision. The energy projectors, straining to slow the third behemoth's emergence, were pushing the moon's power systems beyond their limits. Warning klaxons blared throughout the facility as systems began to overload. "We can't maintain this output," his second-in-command reported, her face grim. "The colony's life support systems are starting to fail." Hawkins closed his eyes for a brief moment, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. When he opened them, his gaze was resolute. "Begin evacuation procedures for all non-essential personnel. Divert all power from the colonies to the projectors." As the order was given, Hawkins watched on the monitors as the lunar colonies began to darken, life support systems shutting down one by one. In space, the energy beams from the moon intensified, pushing back against the third behemoth's inexorable advance. Back on the orbital station, Paul received a transmission from Dr. Emily Allen on Earth. "We've made a breakthrough," her excited voice came through. "We've adapted the nano-weapon to target the third behemoth's phase-shifting abilities. Sending you the upgrade data now." Paul's fingers flew over the controls, beginning the delicate process of integrating the new specifications into Aurora's neural interface. As the data flowed into her system, Aurora's body convulsed, her back arching off the bed. "Aurora," Paul called out, his voice tight with concern. When her eyes opened, they blazed with an intensity that was almost painful to look at. "I can see it," she whispered. "I can see how to stop it." With a thought, Aurora directed the swarms of nanobots towards the third behemoth. The tiny machines, now enhanced with the ability to interact with the entity's phase state, began to infiltrate its structure. Where they touched, the behemoth's form solidified, unable to shift back into its ethereal state. The battle hung in a precarious balance. The second behemoth was on the verge of total destruction, its massive form breaking apart under the combined assault of the Allied fleet. The third entity, now partially vulnerable thanks to Aurora's enhanced nanobots and the urquan's phase-locked torpedoes, fought with increasing desperation against the forces arrayed against it. Yet even as the tide seemed to turn in humanity's favor, new complications arose. The space-time rift, its stability compromised by the ancestral fleet's attempts to generate a controlled singularity, began to fluctuate wildly. Energy readings from the rift spiked, suggesting the possibility of more entities preparing to emerge. As the battle reached its crescendo, the fate of the solar system remained uncertain. The combined forces of Earth, Gamelons, and urquan pressed their advantage, but resources were stretched to their breaking point. In the heart of the orbital station, Aurora's fusion of biology and technology continued to evolve, her consciousness expanding to encompass the vast battlefield. The question remained, would it be enough to turn the tide, or had the defenders of Earth only delayed the inevitable? Inevitable, and yet, even as hope seemed to fade, a glimmer of possibility emerged from the chaos. The Starfire's engines flared as Captain Zev expertly maneuvered the ship through the treacherous debris field. Nelson and his team clung to the handholds in the airlock, their bodies still adjusting to the artificial gravity after their harrowing rescue from space. "Brace yourselves," Zev's voice crackled over the intercom as a massive chunk of the dying behemoth hurtled towards them. The ship banked sharply, narrowly avoiding collision. Nelson felt his stomach lurch as the inertial dampeners struggled to compensate. Through the viewport, he watched in awe as the second behemoth's colossal form began to disintegrate. Fragments the size of cities broke away, drawn inexorably towards the growing singularity at the heart of the battle. Admiral Zhang Wei to all ships came the urgent transmission. Reposition immediately. Form defensive screens around Earth. Priority is intercepting debris. The fleet moved with practiced precision, reorganizing into layer formations. Earth and Gamelon vessels interlocked their shields, creating a barrier against the oncoming storm of behemoth remains. Aboard the orbital command station, Paul's fingers flew across the control panel, his face a mask of concentration as he monitored Aurora's vital signs. The transformation taking place before his eyes both fascinated and terrified him. Aurora's skin now gleamed with a metallic sheen, intricate patterns of circuitry spreading across her body like luminous tattoos. Her eyes, when they opened, blazed with an otherworldly light. "Paul!" she gasped, her voice a mix of pain and exhilaration. "The nanobots. I can feel them evolving, adapting. We're so close to turning the tide." Paul nodded, his concern evident. "Dr. Allen's latest upgrades are integrating now. But Aurora, your systems are reaching critical levels. We need to dash." "No!" Aurora interrupted, her tone brooking no argument. "We can't stop now. Earth needs us." In space, the urquan fleet moved with deadly purpose. Their ships, angular and alien, surrounded the dying second behemoth. Powerful tractor beams engaged, seizing control of the largest fragments. Supreme Commander Xerzada all urquan vessels. The transmission rang out. Redirect behemoth debris towards the singularity. Target the emerging third entity. The space around the rift warped and twisted as the urquan weaponized the very remains of their enemy. Chunks of biomechanical flesh accelerated to impossible speeds, slamming into the partially materialized form of the third behemoth. On the lunar surface, Commander John Hawkins stood in the heart of the beleaguered control center. Warning klaxons blared as system after system approached failure. "Sir," his second-in-command reported, her face ashen. "Life support in the outlying colonies is critical. We can't maintain this output." Hawkins' teeth clenched. He knew what had to be done. Initiate emergency override protocols. Channel all remaining power directly to the projectors. But, sir, that'll trigger a cascade failure across Dash. Do it, Hawkins ordered, his voice grim. We lose the moon, we lose Earth. Make it happen. As the override engaged, the lunar energy projectors surged with renewed intensity. The beams lanced out, striking the third behemoth with devastating force. In the depths of space, Admiral Zorthak faced his own impossible decision. Two of the three ancestral fleet ships involved in generating the controlled singularity were on the verge of structural collapse. All crew, evacuate to the Vanguard immediately, he commanded. Control systems to automatic. We'll pilot remotely. As the last of the crew transferred to the remaining vessel, Zorthak took direct control. His fingers danced across the ancient controls, pushing the failing ships beyond their limits. The singularity stabilized, its hungry maw expanding. On Earth, Director Marcus Keller's voice rang out in the War Council chamber. We have one last card to play. The orbital defense grid. If we channel the full power of the Harmony cores, we might be able to seal the rift. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the assembled leaders. The energy required would leave Earth defenseless, one general protested. If we don't stop this now, there won't be an Earth to defend, Keller countered. As the debate raged, a new horror unfolded in space. The third behemoth, now fully materialized, revealed its true form. Multiple smaller protrusions, each a miniature version of the main entity, began to detach and move independently. All ships be advised, Admiral Zhang Wei's voice cut through the chaos. New hostile entities detected. Adjust targeting parameters immediately. The battle took on a new dimension of complexity as the fleet engaged both the massive third behemoth and its swarm of offspring. Weapons fire crisscrossed the void, illuminating the darkness with flashes of destructive energy. In the heart of the orbital station, Aurora's body convulsed as she pushed her abilities to their absolute limit. The nanobots under her control swarmed towards the behemoth entities, their upgraded programming allowing them to penetrate the creature's phase-shifted defenses. Paul watched in growing alarm as Aurora's neural interface readings spiked dangerously. He knew he had to act, or risk losing her entirely. With a deep breath, he initiated the experimental linkage protocol. As his neural implant connected with Aurora's interface, Paul's world exploded into a kaleidoscope of sensation. The vast expanse of space, the intricate dance of subatomic particles, the very fabric of reality, all became visible to his enhanced perception. Together, their linked consciousness directed the nanobot swarms with unprecedented precision. The tiny machines burrowed into the behemoth's structures, disrupting their ability to phase shift and regenerate. As the battle raged, Dr. Emily Allen's voice cut through the communications channels. We've found a weakness. The behemoths are vulnerable to specific gravitational wave frequencies. If we can coordinate our attacks, Dash. Understood. Admiral Zhang Wei responded. All ships, prepare for final assault. This is our last chance to end this. The combined fleet began to reposition, forming intricate patterns designed to generate the required gravitational disturbance. The ancestral fleet vessels took up positions around the singularity, their ancient technology humming with power. Just as hope began to rise, a new complication emerged. The urquan ships suddenly broke formation, their communication channels going silent. Supreme Commander Xurzov's flagship moved towards the singularity, its energy reading spiking to unprecedented levels. What are they doing? Nelson demanded, watching from the bridge of the starfire. Captain Zev shook his head, his expression grim. I don't know, but I have a feeling we're about to find out. As the urquan's true intentions remained shrouded in mystery, the combined forces of Earth and its allies prepared for their final, daring plan. The fate of not just one world, but countless others beyond the rift, hung in the balance. The cosmic battle approached its climax, with the very fabric of reality threatening to unravel around them. As the cosmic battle approached its climax, with the very fabric of reality threatening to unravel, the combined forces of Earth and its allies prepared to execute their final, daring plan. Admiral Zhang Wei's voice cut through the chaos, his tone steady despite the enormity of the situation. All ships, assume formation Delta 9. Prepare for coordinated assault on my mark. The fleet moved with practiced precision, Earth and Gamelin vessels arranging themselves in a multi-layered defensive formation around the planet. The remaining ancestral fleet ships took up strategic positions near the singularity, their ancient technology humming with power. On the lunar surface, Commander John Hawkins stood in the control center, sweat beading on his forehead as he watched systems fail one by one. "This is it," he muttered, reaching for the final override. "Redirect all remaining power to the projectors. Every last drop." The lunar base shuddered as its energy reserves were channeled into the massive weapons. The projector barrels began to glow with an intensity that hurt the eyes, charging up for one last, desperate attack. Aboard the orbital command station, Aurora and Paul's linked consciousness expanded, their shared perception encompassing the vastness of space and the microscopic world of the nanobots. Their bodies convulsed in unison, skin taking on a metallic sheen as intricate patterns of circuitry spread across their flesh. "Target acquired," Aurora gasped, her voice barely recognizable. "Nanobot swarms. Engaging." Paul's fingers twitched involuntarily, mirroring the movements of the nanobots as they swarmed towards the third behemoth and its offspring. The tiny machines burrowed into the entity's structures with unprecedented precision, guided by the couple's merged intelligence. Dr. Emily Allen's voice crackled over the comm system, her excitement palpable even through the static. "Admiral Zhang, we've isolated the exact frequency needed to disrupt the behemoth's cohesion. Transmitting data now." Zhang Wei nodded to his tactical officer. "Upload those frequencies to all ships. Synchronize weapon systems accordingly." As the fleet adjusted their targeting parameters, the urquan ships launched a barrage of phase-lock torpedoes. The projectiles detonated in carefully calculated patterns, creating a web of stable space-time that trapped portions of the behemoth swarm. Admiral Zorthak's weathered face was illuminated by the flickering displays of his command center. "Ancestral fleet, this is our moment. Channel all power to the singularity manipulators. Generate those gravity waves." The ancient Gamelin ships pushed themselves to the limit, their hulls groaning under the strain. The singularity at the heart of the battlefield pulsed and writhed, emitting waves of gravitational distortion that resonated at the precise frequency needed to tear the behemoths apart. As the coordinated assault unfolded, the third behemoth and its offspring began to show signs of destabilization. Their phase-shifting abilities faltered, and visible cracks appeared in their biomechanical structures. The swarm of mini-behemoths started to break apart, some drawn inexorably into the singularity, while others were torn asunder by the gravitational forces. However, the tide of battle shifted unexpectedly as Supreme Commander Xurzaw's flagship suddenly broke formation. The massive urquan vessel surged towards a space-time rift, its energy readings spiking off the charts. Aboard the Starfire, Admiral Nelson's eyes widened as he studied the readings. "Captain Zev, look at those emission patterns. They're not trying to close the rift. They're stabilizing it." Zev's face darkened. "But why? What could they possibly gain from Dash?" "No time for speculation," Nelson interrupted, keying the comm system. "Admiral Zhang, this is Nelson. The urquan are attempting to stabilize the rift. We need to stop them, now." Zhang Wei's response was immediate. "Understood. Gamma and Epsilon squadrons, disengage from the behemoth assault. Intercept that urquan flagship. As a portion of the fleet peeled away to confront this new threat, the strain on the various systems reached critical levels. On the lunar surface, the energy projectors began to overload, causing a chain reaction of explosions across the base. Hawkins staggered as the control center shook violently. "Keep those beams focused," he shouted over the din of alarms. "We hold until the last second." In space, the ancestral fleet's remaining ships showed signs of imminent core breaches. Admiral Zorthak's voice was strained as he reported, "We can't maintain this output much longer. The singularity is becoming unstable." On Earth, the global defense grid activated by Director Marcus Keller began to manifest visibly. The Harmony core-enhanced orbital platforms generated an interconnected web of energy fields, slowly forming a protective sphere around the planet. Keller watched from the War Council chamber, his face illuminated by the holographic display. "If we can complete this shield, we might be able to isolate Earth from whatever's coming through that rift." As if in response to his words, long-range sensors detected a new threat emerging from the destabilizing space-time rift. A massive object began to materialize, a behemoth of unprecedented size, dwarfing even the third entity. "My God," Zhang Wei breathed, staring at the tactical display. "All ships be advised. New contact emerging from the rift. Designating it Alpha Behemoth. Adjust formation immediately." The colossal being exerted its influence on the battlefield as soon as it appeared. Its gravitational pull affected the trajectories of nearby ships and debris, and its mere presence seemed to invigorate the remaining behemoth offspring. Zhang Wei's mind raced, assessing the rapidly changing situation. With a heavy heart, he keyed the fleet-wide comm system. "All forces," this is Admiral Zhang, "consolidate defensive positions. Form a final line between that thing and Earth. Whatever comes through that rift, it stops here." As the Allied fleet regrouped, facing the terrifying presence of the Alpha Behemoth, the outcome of the next few moments hung in the balance. The success of their desperate plan, the survival of Earth, and perhaps the fate of the entire galaxy now depended on the coordination of their remaining resources and the uncertain stability of the singularity. The stage was set for a climactic confrontation that would push the limits of human ingenuity and alien technology to their breaking point. As the Alpha Behemoth loomed ever larger, its titanic form blocking out the stars, the defenders of Earth steeled themselves for what could be their final stand. The Alpha Behemoth loomed before them, its colossal form eclipsing the stars. Admiral Zhang Wei's mind raced, assessing the rapidly changing situation. He keyed the fleet-wide comm system, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. "All ships, execute Formation Omega. I repeat, execute Formation Omega." The remaining Earth and Gamelin vessels responded with practiced precision, swiftly arranging themselves into a tight, spherical formation around the massive entity. As they moved into position, Zhang Wei's tactical display lit up with a web of overlapping firing solutions. "Concentrate all fire on these coordinates," he ordered, transmitting the data to the fleet. "We'll create a contained field of destructive energy. Hit it with everything we've got." The space around the Alpha Behemoth erupted in a dazzling display of weapons fire. Laser beams, plasma bolts, and phase-locked torpedoes converged on the creature's hulking form, bathing it in a sea of destructive energy. Aboard the starfire, Admiral Nelson turned to Captain Zev, his expression grim. "We need to deal with that urquan flagship. Now." Zev nodded, his scaled fingers dancing across the control panel. "I've modified our sensors to analyze the pulsating field they're emitting. It's like nothing I've ever seen before." Nelson leaned in, studying the readouts. His eyes widened as he processed the data. "They're not trying to close the rift at all. They're stabilizing it, using some form of energy manipulation we've never encountered." "But why?" Zev asked, his voice tight with tension. I don't know, Nelson replied, but we're going to find out. Set an intercept course for that flagship. We need to stop whatever they're doing before it's too late. As the starfire broke away from the main fleet, the orbital command station shuddered with a surge of power. Inside, Aurora and Paul's bodies convulsed in unison, their skin now completely covered in intricate, glowing circuitry. Their shared consciousness expanded beyond the confines of their physical forms, merging with the swarms of nanobots under their control. With this enhanced connection, they directed the microscopic machines with unprecedented precision, targeting the Alpha Behemoth's most vulnerable points. "We've found weak spots," Aurora gasped, her voice barely audible. "Directing nanobots to penetrate outer shell." Paul's fingers twitched involuntarily, mirroring the movements of the nanobot swarms. "Incredible," he whispered. "We can see everything, the creature's entire internal structure." Their merged consciousness relayed the information to Dr. Emily Allen on Earth. The scientist's eyes widened as she processed the data streaming across her screens. "This is it," she exclaimed, her fingers flying across her keyboard. "There's a central node within the Alpha Behemoth structure. It appears to be the control center for its entire neural network." She quickly compiled her findings and transmitted them to the fleet. "Admiral Zhang, I'm sending you coordinates for the Behemoth's weak point. If we can concentrate our attack there, we might be able to bring it down." On the lunar surface, Commander John Hawkins stood in the crumbling control center of the lunar base. Alarms blared as systems failed around him, but his focus remained unshaken. "This is our last shot," he muttered, reaching for the final override. Redirecting all power to projectors. Every last drop. The base shuddered violently as its remaining energy reserves were channeled into the massive weapons. The projector barrels began to glow with an intensity that hurt the eyes, charging up for one final, desperate attack. "Targeting solution locked," Hawkins announced over the comm. "Firing in 3, 2, 1. A blinding beam of concentrated energy erupted from the lunar surface, streaking across space towards the Alpha Behemoth. It struck the creature's central node with pinpoint accuracy, causing a massive explosion that rocked the colossal entity. The lunar base's core reactor, pushed far beyond its limits, began to melt down. Hawkins thumped his hand on the emergency evacuation alert, his voice steady as he addressed his remaining crew. "All personnel, abandon base immediately. This is not a drill. I repeat, abandon base immediately." As rescue ships from Earth's orbital defense platforms raced towards the moon, the lunar base began to break apart. Chunks of debris scattered across the battlefield, further complicating the ongoing space battle. Admiral Zorthak's weathered face was illuminated by the flickering displays of his command center. He surveyed the remains of the once mighty ancestral fleet, now reduced to a handful of battered ships. "This is our final stand," he announced to his crew. "Form triangular formation around the singularity. We're going to compress and stabilize it, turn it into a weapon against that monstrosity." The ancient Gamelin ships moved into position, their advanced technology straining to manipulate the fabric of space-time itself. The singularity at the heart of the battlefield began to pulse and writhe, its energy focused into a concentrated beam aimed at the Alpha Behemoth. On Earth, Director Marcus Keller watched as the global defense grid neared completion. The energy barrier solidified into a shimmering protective sphere around the planet. However, the immense power draw began to cause widespread blackouts across the surface. "Hold steady," Keller ordered, his voice tense. "We need to maintain the shield at all costs." The Alpha Behemoth, reeling from the combined assault, unleashed a new form of attack. Powerful gravitational pulses emanated from its massive form, disrupting the formation of the Allied fleet. Ships were thrown off course, their systems temporarily disabled by the intense fluctuations. Admiral Zhang Wei's voice crackled over the comm system. All ships break into smaller groups. Execute hit-and-run attacks on the target coordinates. We need to keep the pressure on that central node. As the battle raged on, the space-time rift began to expand rapidly, its edges pulsing with an otherworldly light. Long-range sensors detected multiple large objects beginning to materialize within the rift, heralding the arrival of more cosmic horrors. Admiral Nelson, aboard the Starfire, watched as the urquan flagship moved closer to the expanding rift. Captain Zev set an intercept course. We need to disrupt whatever they're doing with those modified phase-lock torpedoes. As they approached the urquan vessel, energy readings suddenly spiked off the charts. The rift pulsed ominously, growing larger with each passing second. Nelson's eyes narrowed as he studied the tactical display. This is it, Captain. Whatever's coming through that rift, we need to stop it here and now. The Starfire surged forward, weapons primed, as the cosmic battle entered its most critical phase. The fate of Earth, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance as the defenders faced their greatest challenge yet. The Starfire surged forward, its weapons primed and ready. As Admiral Nelson prepared to engage the urquan flagship, an urgent transmission from Earth interrupted his focus. Admiral Nelson, this is Dr. Emily Allen. We've just received critical information that could change everything. Nelson's brow furrowed as he listened to Dr. Allen's hurried explanation about the Gamlan artifact discovered in the Himalayas. His mind raced, processing the potential implications of this new development. Understood, Doctor. Keep working on unlocking its secrets. We'll do what we can to buy you time up here. As Nelson relayed the information to the rest of the fleet, the battle around them intensified. The Alpha Behemoth, still reeling from the concentrated attacks on its central node, began to lash out with renewed ferocity. Massive tendrils of biomechanical matter extended from its form, each one seeking out an allied ship. Evasive maneuvers. Zhang Wei's voice crackled over the comm system. Don't let those tendrils make contact with your hull. The space around the Alpha Behemoth became a chaotic dance of ships and energy beams as the Allied fleet struggled to avoid the creature's grasp while maintaining their assault. Several vessels weren't quick enough, and the tendrils latched onto their hulls, quickly beginning to inject a rapidly reproducing substance into the ships. On the orbital command station, Aurora and Paul's shared consciousness expanded beyond their physical forms. Their skin glowed with intricate patterns of light as they directed the nanobot swarms with unprecedented precision. We can see the entire network, Aurora whispered, her voice strained. The defense grid. We can strengthen it. Paul's fingers twitched in sync with the movements of the nanobots, redirecting swarms to reinforce the barrier. As the nanobots worked to bolster Earth's defenses, the ancestral fleet made its final, desperate move. Admiral Zorthak's voice was solemn as he addressed his crew. Prepare for evacuation. We will not surrender to these cosmic horrors. Our sacrifice will close this rift and save countless lives. Two of the remaining Gamlan ships, their crews reduced to skeleton crews of volunteers, set course for the heart of the singularity. As they approached, the fabric of space-time began to warp and twist around them. Meanwhile, aboard the urquan flagship, Supreme Commander Xurza observed the unfolding battle with cold calculation. The phase-lock torpedoes captured by their energy field had yielded valuable data, and now they prepared to turn this knowledge against their enemies. Deploy the modified energy pulses, Xurza ordered. Stabilize sections of the rift. We must control the flow between dimensions. As the urquan technology interacted with the space-time anomaly, pockets of calm began to form within the chaotic distortion. These stable zones pulsed with an eerie light, creating safe passages through the rift. Back on Earth, Dr. Allen and her team worked feverishly to unravel the mysteries of the gamelin artifact. The cylindrical device hummed with energy, its intricate markings pulsing in rhythm with the distant behemoths. "We need to amplify this energy signature," Dr. Allen said, her fingers flying across a control panel. "If we can replicate it on a larger scale, we might be able to use it as a weapon against the behemoths." As her team scrambled to modify their equipment, Director Marcus Keller entered the lab, his face grim. "Doctor, we're running out of time. The global defense grid is holding, but barely. We need a breakthrough, and we need it now." In space, Admiral Zhang Wei faced a difficult decision. The rift continued to expand, and new, massive shapes were beginning to take form within its swirling depths. "All ships in Sectors 7 through 12, break off from the Alpha Behemoth assault," Zhang Wei commanded. "Form a defensive line near the rift. We must be ready to intercept whatever comes through." As a significant portion of the fleet repositioned, the Alpha Behemoth seized the opportunity to launch a massive counteroffensive. Its tendrils lashed out with renewed vigor, finding gaps in the now-thinned ranks of its attackers. Aboard the Starfire, Admiral Nelson and Captain Zev watched as the urquan flagship continued its manipulation of the rift. "We can't let them control that anomaly," Nelson said, his eyes sharp. "Zev, set a course directly for their ship. We're going to disrupt their energy field, even if we have to ram them to do it." The gamelin vessel accelerated towards the urquan flagship, forcing Supreme Commander Xurzat to divert resources to defend against the incoming threat. The move created a momentary fluctuation in the stable zones within the rift, causing ripples of distortion to spread across the battlefield. As the various fronts of the battle converged, the space around Earth became a maelstrom of energy, debris, and cosmic forces beyond human comprehension. The sacrificial gamelin ships plunged deeper into the singularity, their hulls beginning to buckle under the immense gravitational forces. Admiral Zorthak's voice, filled with a mix of sorrow and purpose, echoed across the Allied comm channels one last time. "For the future of all life in this galaxy, we make our final stand. May our sacrifice not be in vain." The ancestral fleet's remaining ships disappeared into the heart of the anomaly, their energy signatures flaring brilliantly before being swallowed by the cosmic darkness. For a moment, the battlefield fell silent. All eyes turned towards the rift, waiting to see if the gamelon's audacious attempt would succeed in closing the tear in space-time. As the Allied forces held their breath, the rift pulsed ominously, its edges fluctuating wildly. The massive shapes within began to push against the dimensional barrier, their outlines becoming clearer with each passing second. The fate of Earth, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance as the defenders faced the culmination of their greatest challenge. Challenge yet, the Starfire surged forward, its weapons primed and ready. As Admiral Nelson prepared to engage the urquan flagship, an urgent transmission from Earth interrupted his focus. "Admiral Nelson, this is Dr. Emily Allen. We've just received critical information that could change everything." Nelson's brow furrowed as he listened to Dr. Allen's hurried explanation about the gamelin artifact discovered in the Himalayas. His mind raced, processing the potential implications of this new development. "Understood, Doctor. Keep working on unlocking its secrets. We'll do what we can to buy you time up here." As Nelson relayed the information to the rest of the fleet, the battle around them intensified. The space around the Alpha Behemoth became a chaotic dance of ships and energy beams as the Allied fleet struggled to avoid the creature's grasp while maintaining their assault. On Earth, Dr. Allen and her team worked feverishly to unravel the mysteries of the gamelin artifact. The cylindrical device hummed with energy, its intricate markings pulsing in rhythm with the distant behemoths. "We need to amplify this energy signature," Dr. Allen said, her fingers flying across a control panel. "If we can replicate it on a larger scale, we might be able to use it as a weapon against the behemoths." Hours passed like minutes as the scientists pushed their equipment to its limits. Suddenly, a surge of energy coursed through the lab, causing lights to flicker and monitors to buzz with static. "We've done it!" Dr. Allen exclaimed, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. "We've successfully replicated the artifact's energy signature on a larger scale." The replicated device, now several times the size of the original, pulsed with an otherworldly glow. As the team hurriedly prepared it for transport, Director Marcus Keller burst into the lab, his face a mask of urgency. "How soon can we get this integrated into the global defense grid?" he demanded, his gaze fixed on the humming artifact. "We're moving it now," Dr. Allen replied, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "There's a secure facility near the equator that's perfect for integration. We'll need an hour, maybe two, to get it fully operational." As the device was carefully loaded onto a high-speed transport, the battle in space reached a critical juncture. Admiral Zhang Wei's voice crackled over the comm system, tension evident in his usually calm demeanor. "All ships in sectors 7 through 12 form a defensive line near the rift. We must be ready to intercept whatever comes through." The fleet repositioned, creating a barrier of metal and energy between Earth and the expanding rift. As they watched, the swirling vortex pulsed ominously, and a new shape began to materialize. Energy readings off the charts. A sensor officer shouted. "It's smaller than the Alpha Behemoth, but still massive." The entity that emerged from the rift was a twisted mass of biomechanical horror, its surface a constantly shifting array of metallic plates and pulsing organic matter. As soon as it fully materialized, it unleashed a barrage of electromagnetic pulses that sent nearby ships spinning out of control. "Beta Behemoth," Zhang Wei declared, giving the new threat a designation. "All ships, adjust your shields to compensate for the EM interference." As the Allied forces scrambled to counter this new threat, Admiral Nelson found himself facing an unexpected complication. The urquan flagship had begun emitting a series of complex energy patterns that seemed to resonate with the Beta Behemoth's electromagnetic pulses. "Captain Zev, are you seeing this?" Nelson asked, his eyes narrowing as he studied the tactical display. "Affirmative, Admiral," Zev replied, his voice tight with concern. "The energy patterns appear to be some form of communication. It's as if the urquan are trying to establish contact with the behemoth." Nelson's mind raced, considering the implications of this development. If there's a connection between the urquan and these cosmic entities, it could change everything we thought we knew about this conflict. He quickly opened a channel to the rest of the fleet. "All ships be advised. We have reason to believe the urquan may be attempting to communicate or even control the behemoths. Intercepting their flagship is now our top priority." As Nelson's ship altered course to intercept the urquan vessel, a brilliant beam of energy suddenly erupted from Earth's surface, streaking across space to strike the Alpha Behemoth. The cosmic entity writhed in apparent agony, its movements becoming erratic as layers of its biomechanical structure began to peel away. "The replicated artifact is online," Keller's voice announced over the comm channel, a note of triumph in his words. "We're channeling its energy through the global defense grid. It's having a significant effect on the Alpha Behemoth structure." As the Allied forces watched in awe, the Alpha Behemoth's outer layers continued to disintegrate under the assault from Earth. Beneath the crumbling exterior, a pulsating core became visible, its energy readings unlike anything they had encountered before. "All ships, focus your fire on that exposed core," Zhang Wei commanded. "This may be our best chance to deal a decisive blow." The fleet responded immediately, concentrating their attacks on the vulnerable point. However, the Alpha Behemoth was far from defeated. In a display of terrifying adaptability, it began to absorb and assimilate nearby debris, including fragments of its own body and damaged ships. Its massive form grew even larger, presenting an ever-increasing challenge to the Allied forces. Aboard the orbital command station, Aurora and Paul's shared consciousness expanded beyond their physical forms, their skin glowing with intricate patterns of light. Through their enhanced connection to the nanobot swarms, they extended their influence towards the newly arrived beta behemoth. "We can see its internal structure," Aurora whispered, her voice strained with concentration. "The nanobots are infiltrating its systems." Paul's fingers twitched in sync with the movements of the microscopic machines. "We're attempting to disrupt its core functions. It's resisting, but we're making progress." As the battle raged on multiple fronts, the compressed singularity, created by the ancestral fleet's sacrifice, began to exhibit strange properties. Pulses of exotic particles erupted from its center, interacting with the behemoth's biomechanical structures in unpredictable ways. Admiral Zhang Wei, assessing the rapidly evolving situation, made a bold decision. "Launch the phase-locked torpedo drones," he ordered. "Target the Alpha Behemoth's exposed core. We need to press our advantage while we have it." A swarm of unmanned drones shot forth from the Allied ships, each equipped with a miniaturized version of the devastating phase-locked torpedoes. They weaved through the chaos of the battlefield, their advanced evasion algorithms allowing them to dodge the Alpha Behemoth's defensive tendrils. As the drones closed in on their target, Admiral Nelson's ship approached the urquan flagship. Suddenly, a powerful tractor beam locked onto their vessel, halting their advance. "Admiral, we're caught in a tractor beam," Captain Zev reported, his hands flying over the controls. "It's coming from there, a cloaked urquan support ship." Nelson gritted his teeth, realizing the complexity of the trap they'd stumbled into. "Break us free, Captain. We can't let the urquan reach the beta behemoth." As Nelson's ship struggled against the tractor beam, the phase-locked torpedo drones neared their target. The Alpha Behemoth's core pulsed with increasing intensity, as if sensing the imminent threat. The outcome of the next few moments would be crucial in determining the fate of Earth and its defenders. The phase-locked torpedo drones closed in on the Alpha Behemoth's exposed core, their deadly payload primed for maximum devastation. Suddenly, a series of unexpected energy pulses erupted from Earth's surface, catching everyone off guard. The replicated Gamelin artifact, now integrated into the global defense grid, had begun emitting a low-frequency hum that rapidly increased in intensity. Dr. Emily Allen's voice crackled over the comm channel, her tone a mix of excitement and concern. "Admiral Zhang Wei, we're detecting a massive energy surge from the artifact. It's interacting with Earth's magnetic field in ways we never anticipated." The effects of this new development were immediately apparent in space. The Alpha Behemoth's exposed core reacted violently to the energy signature, its pulsations becoming erratic and unstable. The entity's defensive layers began to fluctuate, creating temporary gaps in its armor. Admiral Zhang Wei's eyes widened as he assessed the tactical display. "This is our chance," he announced, his voice filled with urgency. "All ships, concentrate fire on the Behemoth's weakened areas. Use everything we've got." The Allied fleet responded with a furious barrage, their weapons finding purchase in the creature's destabilized structure. Beams of concentrated energy and swarms of missiles poured into the gaps, eliciting howls of pain from the cosmic entity that reverberated through space. Meanwhile, aboard the Starfire, Admiral Nelson and Captain Zev found themselves momentarily freed from the urquan tractor beam. The support ship systems had been disrupted by the energy pulses from Earth, giving them a narrow window of opportunity. "Full power to engines," Nelson commanded. "Get us clear and resume intercept course on the urquan flagship." As the Starfire surged forward, the space around them began to warp and twist. The energy beam from Earth had intersected with the compressed singularity created by the ancestral fleet's sacrifice, forming a series of localized temporal distortions throughout the battlefield. Nelson watched in awe as parts of the Alpha Behemoth shifted in and out of phase with normal space-time, further weakening its defenses. "Zev, plot a course through those distortions," he ordered, a daring plan forming in his mind. "We'll use them to approach the urquan from unexpected angles." On the orbital command station, Aurora and Paul's shared consciousness expanded exponentially. The nanobot swarms under their control began to resonate with the energy pulses from Earth, greatly enhancing their ability to infiltrate the behemoth systems. "We're making progress," Aurora whispered, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "The nanobots are penetrating deeper into the alpha behemoth's core structure." Paul nodded, his fingers dancing across the control interface. "Redirecting swarms to target critical systems. We might be able to shut it down from the inside." As the battle raged on, a new threat emerged from the depths of space. The scout team sent to investigate the anomaly at the edge of the solar system returned with alarming news. "Admiral Zhang Wei," the scout leader reported, his voice tense. "We've detected a massive object approaching at incredible speed. Initial scans suggest it could be another behemoth, potentially larger than any we've encountered." Zhang Wei's face hardened as he processed this information. He quickly began issuing orders to reorganize the fleet, forming a new defensive line at the outer edges of the solar system while maintaining the assault on the alpha behemoth. "We're stretched thin," he muttered, studying the tactical display. "But we can't let up now. Not when we're so close to victory." Back on Earth, Dr. Allen and her team made a startling discovery within the ancient gamelan artifact. A hidden compartment revealed a data crystal of unknown origin, its surface etched with intricate symbols. "This could be it," Dr. Allen breathed, carefully inserting the crystal into an analysis device. "The key to understanding the behemoth's origins and weaknesses." As the battle for Earth and the solar system entered a new phase of complexity, the Allied forces found themselves navigating a volatile and unpredictable battlefield. The temporal distortions created pockets of accelerated time, where ships and debris aged rapidly, while other areas seemed frozen in stasis. Admiral Nelson guided the Starfire through this chaotic landscape, using the distortions to outmaneuver the urquan flagship. With each jump through the warped space-time, they closed the distance to their target. "Weapons hot," Nelson ordered as they emerged from a particularly violent distortion. "Prepare to fire on my mark." The urquan vessel loomed before them, its once coordinated movements now erratic and confused. As Nelson prepared to give the order to fire, a blinding flash of light erupted from the direction of Earth, momentarily overwhelming their sensors. When the light faded, a shimmering energy field was visible around the planet, its leading edge rapidly expanding outward towards the moon's orbit. The battle for Earth had entered a new and crucial phase, with the fate of humanity and its allies hanging in the balance. Balance. The fate of humanity and its allies hung in the balance as the cosmic battle unfolded across the solar system. As the shimmering energy field expanded outward from Earth, Dr. Emily Allen's team made a groundbreaking discovery. The data crystal found within the ancient gamelan artifact began to reveal its secrets, projecting a holographic map of Mars with a pulsing marker indicating a specific location. "Director Keller," Dr. Allen called, her voice tight with excitement. "We've found coordinates for a hidden gamelan outpost on Mars. It could contain advanced defensive technology crucial to our survival." Keller's response was immediate. "Assemble a team. We need to investigate this outpost immediately." Within minutes, an elite squad led by Major James Hawkins was en route to Mars, their spacecraft pushing its engines to the limit as they raced against time. In the void of space, the Alpha Behemoth's destabilization reached a critical point. Large sections of its biomechanical structure began to age rapidly and disintegrate, caught in the temporal distortions caused by the Earth-based energy beam's interaction with the compressed singularity. Admiral Zhang Wei, his eyes fixed on the tactical display, saw their opportunity. "All ships, concentrate fire on the behemoth's core." This is our chance to end this threat once and for all. The Allied fleet responded with a devastating barrage of weapons fire. Energy beams and missiles streaked across space, finding their mark in the behemoth's exposed core. The cosmic entity writhed in agony, its once impenetrable defenses now crumbling under the relentless assault. As the Alpha Behemoth structure continued to collapse, a new threat emerged. The Beta Behemoth, still trapped in the temporal distortions near the space-time rift, began to decay rapidly. In its death throes, it released a swarm of smaller, autonomous units that broke free from the distortion field. "New contacts," a sensor officer shouted. "Hundreds of them, each about the size of a small spacecraft. They're heading straight for our defensive line." Admiral Zhang Wei's face hardened as he assessed the situation. "Redistribute our forces," he ordered. "Form a screen to intercept those units. We can't let them breach our defenses." Meanwhile, Admiral Nelson's daring maneuver through the temporal distortions paid off. The Starfire, piloted by the skilled hands of Captain Zev, emerged from a pocket of warped space-time directly behind the urquan flagship. "We have a clear shot," Zev reported, his fingers poised over the weapons controls. Nelson nodded grimly. "Fire at will, Captain. Let's end this." A salvo of modified phase-locked torpedoes streaked from the Starfire, crossing the short distance to the urquan vessel in seconds. The impacts were devastating, disrupting the ship's energy field and tearing through its propulsion systems. Aboard the urquan flagship, Supreme Commander Xurzha stumbled as his ship shuddered under the assault. "Damage report," he barked. "Multiple hull breaches, propulsion offline," an underling reported, panic evident in its voice. "We've lost our chance to reach the Beta Behemoth, Supreme Commander." Xurzha's eyes narrowed as he made a quick decision. Divert all power to defensive systems. We must protect this ship at all costs. Back on Earth, the global defense grid continued to pulse with increasing intensity. The energy field around the planet expanded further into space, now reaching beyond the moon's orbit. As it grew, it began to interact with the massive object detected at the edge of the solar system, slowing its approach and disrupting its energy signature. On Mars, Major Hawkins and his team reached the coordinates of the hidden Gamelin outpost. They discovered a vast underground complex, its alien architecture a stark contrast to the red Martian landscape. "Fan out and search for anything that looks like defensive technology," Hawkins ordered as they moved deeper into the facility. It didn't take long for them to make a startling discovery. In a cavernous chamber at the heart of the complex, they found a massive device that could only be a prototype planetary shield generator. "This is it," Hawkins breathed, running his hand along the alien controls. "This could be the key to protecting Earth. Let's get this thing activated." As the team worked to bring the ancient Gamelin technology online, the battle in space reached a fever pitch. The Allied forces' assault on the Alpha Behemoth's core finally breached its last defenses. The massive entity emitted a deafening electromagnetic pulse as its core began to collapse, temporarily disabling many of the nearby Allied ships. Admiral Zhang Wei, his own flagship systems rebooting after the pulse, made a split-second decision. "All operational ships, form a protective barrier around our disabled vessels," he commanded. "Use your shields to deflect attacks from the behemoth swarm. We need to buy time for our comrades to get back in the fight." The battle-worn ships of the Allied fleet moved into position, their shields straining under the onslaught of the smaller behemoth units. It was a bold strategy, but one that could mean the difference between victory and annihilation. On the orbital command station, Aurora and Paul's shared consciousness suddenly expanded beyond anything they had experienced before. Their enhanced connection to the nanobot swarms allowed them to glimpse fragments of the dying Alpha Behemoth's vast knowledge and experience. So much information, Aurora gasped, her physical body convulsing in its containment chamber. The origins of the behemoths, their purpose. It's overwhelming. Paul struggled to process the influx of data, his own body shaking uncontrollably. We need to share this, he managed to say before losing consciousness. As the Alpha Behemoth's core continued its catastrophic collapse, it created a localized gravitational anomaly that began to pull in nearby debris. The growing mass threatened to form a new uncontrolled singularity that could destabilize the entire battlefield. Admiral Nelson, aboard the Starfire, recognized the danger immediately. "Zev, set a course for that anomaly," he ordered. "We're going to use the urquan phase-lock torpedo technology we acquired to stabilize it before it reaches critical mass." Captain Zev's hands flew over the controls, guiding their ship through the maelstrom of debris towards the heart of the forming singularity. It was a risky maneuver, but one that could save countless lives if successful. As the Starfire approached the gravitational anomaly, the activation of the Gamelin shield generator on Mars added a new layer of complexity to the battlefield. A massive energy dome began to form around the red planet, its leading edge expanding rapidly toward Earth. The interaction between this new shield, the temporal distortions, and Earth's expanded defense field created a chaotic web of energy fluctuations across the solar system. Ships and debris were caught in pockets of accelerated or slowed time, while others phased in and out of normal space-time. Amidst this cosmic chaos, long-range sensors detected the true nature of the massive object approaching from the edge of the solar system. The Gamma Behemoth, a colossal living factory capable of producing smaller behemoth units, had finally broken through the outer layer of Earth's expanded defense field. Admiral Zhang Wei, his face grim with tenacity, began to redistribute his forces once again. The Allied fleet, already stretched to its limit, now faced the daunting task of confronting this new threat while still dealing with the aftermath of the Alpha Behemoth's collapse and the swarm of units from the decaying Beta Behemoth. As the Gamma Behemoth entered the solar system proper, its massive form casting a shadow across the planets, the battle for Earth and humanity's survival entered its most critical phase. The actions of Admiral Nelson, Aurora, and Paul's newfound knowledge, and the activation of the Mars-based shield generator would all play crucial roles in the moments to come. As the Allied forces faced their greatest challenge yet, as the Gamma Behemoth loomed ever closer, casting its enormous shadow across the solar system, Major James Hawkins and his team delved deeper into the hidden Gamelin outpost on Mars. Their hearts raced with a mixture of excitement and trepidation as they pushed further into the alien complex, searching for anything that could turn the tide of the cosmic battle. "Over here," called out Lieutenant Sarachin, her voice echoing through the cavernous chamber. "I've found another entrance." The team converged on her position, their tactical lights illuminating a previously concealed doorway. With a nod from Hawkins, they carefully made their way into the adjacent room, weapons at the ready. As they crossed the threshold, the chamber came to life. Soft blue lights pulsed along the walls, revealing a massive structure at its center. The team stood in awe, their jaws dropping at the sight before them. "Is that a quantum computer?" Corporal Mike Torres whispered, his eyes wide with disbelief. Hawkins approached the towering machine, its intricate circuitry humming with latent energy. He ran his gloved hand over the smooth, metallic surface, searching for any sign of an activation mechanism. "Let's power this thing up," he ordered, his voice firm with tenacity. "If the Gamelons left it here, it must be important." As the team worked to bring the ancient device online, Admiral Nelson and Captain Zev faced their own challenges in the void of space. The Starfire's engines strained against the pull of the forming singularity, its hull groaning under the immense gravitational forces. "Torpedoes ready, Admiral," Zev reported, his fingers hovering over the launch controls. Nelson nodded, his eyes fixed on the swirling vortex of destruction before them. "Fire." The modified phase-lock torpedoes streaked towards the gravitational anomaly, their energy signatures pulsing with an otherworldly glow. As they impacted the singularity's event horizon, Reality itself seemed to bend and warp. A blinding flash of light erupted from the point of impact, forcing the Starfire's crew to shield their eyes. When they looked again, they gasped in collective amazement. Where the singularity had once threatened to devour everything in its path, a swirling portal now hung in space, a controlled wormhole. "My God!" Nelson breathed, leaning forward in his command chair. "We did it." The wormhole's gravitational pull began to draw in the debris from the disintegrating Alpha Behemoth, along with nearby Behemoth swarm units. The chaotic battlefield slowly started to clear as the cosmic vacuum cleaner did its work. Back on Earth, Dr. Emily Allen's team worked feverishly to analyze the incoming data from the Mars outpost. Holographic displays flickered with complex equations and schematics, painting the air with a dance of light and information. "Director Keller," Dr. Allen called out, her voice tight with urgency. "We've received schematics for a weapon capable of disrupting the Behemoth's biomechanical structure. If we can integrate this with our existing defense systems." Keller's eyes narrowed as he studied the projected schematics. "How quickly can we implement this?" "With your authorization, we can begin converting our orbital defense platforms immediately," Allen replied. Keller nodded decisively. "Do it. I want every available resource directed towards this effort." As Earth's defenses underwent their rapid transformation, the Gamma Behemoth entered the solar system proper. Its massive form dwarfed entire planets, a living factory of destruction preparing to unleash its first wave of newly created Behemoth units. Admiral Zhang Wei's voice crackled over the comm systems of the Allied fleet. "All ships, implement formation Delta 7. Earth vessels, herd those Behemoth units into the kill zones. Gamelin ships, stand by to unleash maximum firepower on my mark." The space around the Allied fleet erupted into a frenzy of movement as ships maneuvered into position. Earth's faster, more agile vessels darted between the approaching Behemoth units, leading them into carefully prepared traps. "Now!" Zhang Wei commanded. The Gamelin warships opened fire, their energy weapons tearing through the concentrated clusters of Behemoth units. Explosions rippled across the battlefield as dozens of the biomechanical monstrosities were vaporized in an instant. On the orbital command station, medical teams rushed to stabilize Aurora and Paul. Their bodies convulsed in their containment chambers, neural implants overloading from the massive influx of data from the dying Alpha Behemoth. "We're losing them," a medic shouted, frantically adjusting the life support systems. Despite their physical distress, Aurora and Paul's shared consciousness continued to direct the nanobot swarms with incredible precision. The microscopic machines swarmed over Behemoth units, disrupting their systems and creating vulnerabilities for the Allied forces to exploit. As the battle raged on, the Mars-based shield generator hummed to life. A shimmering energy field expanded outward from the red planet, quickly encompassing both Mars and Earth in its protective embrace. The Gamma Behemoth's production of new units began to slow, its factory-like processes disrupted by the interference from the alien shield. Admiral Nelson, seeing an opportunity in the newly formed wormhole, made a bold decision. "Prepare a squadron of unmanned drones," he ordered. "We're going to send them through that portal and see where it leads." Within minutes, a group of sleek, automated probes disappeared into the swirling vortex. The bridge crew of the Starfire held their breath, waiting for any sign of the drone's fate. Suddenly, the sensors lit up with new activity. "Admiral," Zev called out, "the drones are back. They've emerged near the Gamma Behemoth." Nelson's eyes widened as he processed this information. "Get me Admiral Zhang Wei," he ordered. "We may have just found our way to outflank this monster." As Nelson relayed the crucial intelligence to Zhang Wei, Major Hawkins and his team on Mars made another startling discovery. Hidden behind the quantum computer, they found a stasis pod, its surface covered in a thin layer of frost. "There's someone inside," Hawkins said, wiping away the condensation to reveal a figure within. It's not human. With trembling hands, they activated the revival sequence. The pod hissed open, revealing a Gamelin scientist, his blue skin pale from centuries of suspended animation. As the alien's eyes fluttered open, he spoke in a hoarse whisper. "I am Dr. Zarkon," he said, his words automatically translated by the team's advanced comm systems. "And I hold the key to defeating the behemoths." The battle for Earth and the solar system had entered a new phase. With the Gamelin weapon schematics, the wormhole network, and now the knowledge of Dr. Zarkon, the Allied forces found themselves with unexpected advantages against the cosmic threat. But as the Gamma Behemoth loomed ever larger, its massive form casting a shadow across the planets, the true test of their newfound resources was yet to come. The fate of humanity hung in the balance as the Allied forces prepared to face their greatest challenge yet. Dr. Zarkon's eyes darted around the high-speed shuttle as it raced towards Earth, his blue skin glistening with a sheen of perspiration. The Gamelin scientist clutched a data pad containing his life's work, the culmination of centuries dedicated to understanding and defeating the behemoth threat. "We're beginning our descent," the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Prepare for atmospheric entry." As the shuttle streaked through Earth's upper atmosphere, leaving a trail of superheated plasma in its wake, Dr. Zarkon's mind raced with the possibilities that lay ahead. The shuttle touched down on a landing pad adjacent to Dr. Allen's research facility, where a team of scientists and military personnel waited anxiously. Dr. Emily Allen stepped forward as the shuttle's hatch opened, extending her hand to the Gamelin scientist. "Dr. Zarkon, welcome to Earth. We have no time to waste." Without missing a beat, they hurried into the facility, their footsteps echoing through the sterile corridors. Zarkon's eyes widened as they entered the main laboratory, taking in the array of advanced Earth technology integrated with Gamelin systems. "Impressive," he murmured, his translator conveying his awe. "You've made remarkable progress." Dr. Allen nodded, gesturing to a holographic display of the behemoth's molecular structure. "We've identified some weaknesses, but we need your expertise to exploit them fully." As the two scientists delved into their work, Admiral Zhang Wei's voice boomed across the bridge of his flagship. "Initiate Operation Starburst. All ships, prepare for wormhole transit." The Allied fleet sprang into action, ships maneuvering into formation around the swirling vortex of the wormhole. Zhang Wei's eyes narrowed as he watched the tactical display, his mind calculating the risks and potential rewards of this audacious strategy. "First wave, engage," he commanded. A squadron of sleek, agile fighters plunged into the wormhole, emerging moments later in a dazzling array of positions around the massive Gamma Behemoth. The colossal entity's surface rippled with activity as it registered the sudden appearance of multiple threats. Captain Lena Rodriguez, leading the fighter squadron, keyed her comms. "All units, commence attack pattern Omega. Hit it hard and fast." The fighters unleashed a barrage of energy weapons, their beams lancing across the Gamma Behemoth's hull. The creature's own defenses responded, massive tendrils of biomechanical matter lashing out at the attacking ships. Back on Earth, the orbital defense platforms hummed with newfound power as the Gamelin-inspired weapon systems came online. Technicians worked feverishly to calibrate the targeting systems, their fingers flying over holographic interfaces. "Platform Alpha online," a controller announced. "Engaging Behemoth swarm units." Beams of concentrated energy erupted from the platform, each one finding its mark with unerring precision. Behemoth units disintegrated under the onslaught, their destruction visible even from the planet's surface. On Mars, Major James Hawkins and his team raced through the subterranean complex, activating long-dormant systems. The air filled with the hum of machinery awakening from centuries of slumber. "We've got production online in Sector 7, Lieutenant Chin reported, her voice tinged with excitement. "Gamelin plasma rifles are rolling off the assembly line." Hawkins nodded, his eyes fixed on a status display. Good. Get those weapons to the front lines ASAP. We need every advantage we can get. In orbit around Earth, the medical bay of the command station bustled with activity. Aurora and Paul lay motionless in their containment chambers, their bodies a fusion of flesh and machine. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the lead physician, studied their vital signs with a mixture of concern and fascination. Their neural patterns are stabilizing, she reported to the anxious staff. The nanobots are integrating with their central nervous systems at an unprecedented rate. Suddenly, Aurora's eyes snapped open, her irises glowing with an otherworldly light. "We see," she whispered, her voice a blend of human and synthetic tones. "We understand." Paul stirred beside her, his movements synchronized with Aurora's. Together, they reached out with their minds, directing the vast swarms of nanobots with newfound clarity and purpose. In space, the battle raged on. The Gamma Behemoth, under constant assault from multiple vectors, began to adapt its strategy. Its massive form pulsed with energy as it redirected its resources. Admiral Nelson, observing from the bridge of the Starfire, frowned at the tactical display. "Something's changing," he muttered. "Zev, what are we seeing?" Captain Zev's fingers danced over the sensor controls. "The Gamma Behemoth is altering its production output. It's creating something new." As they watched, a new type of behemoth unit emerged from the Gamma's vast form. Larger and more heavily armored than its predecessors, the Omega Behemoth radiated power and menace. "All ships be advised," Nelson barked into the comms. "We have a new threat emerging," designating these units as Omega Behemoths. "Extreme caution advised." The Allied fleet scrambled to adjust their tactics, but the Omega Behemoths proved to be formidable opponents. Energy weapons that had torn through previous behemoth units now barely scratched the surface of these new monstrosities. In the Earth Research Facility, Dr. Allen and Dr. Zarkon worked tirelessly, their minds melding human intuition with Gamlan expertise. Holographic models of behemoth molecular structures floated before them, shifting and realigning as they input new data. "There!" Zarkon exclaimed, pointing to a specific frequency pattern. "That's the key to disrupting their cohesion." Dr. Allen's eyes lit up with understanding. "Of course, if we can target that specific resonance frequency." Their fingers flew over the controls, refining the weapon design based on this new insight. As the final calculations fell into place, a new schematic appeared before them: the molecular disruptor. "We need to get this into production immediately," Dr. Allen said, her voice urgent. "The fleet won't be able to hold off those Omega Behemoths for long." As the scientists raced against time to bring their new weapon to bear, the Mars-based shield generator began to show signs of strain. The protective bubble encompassing Mars and Earth flickered ominously under the relentless assault of the behemoth forces. Major Hawkins, alerted to the situation, led his team to the generator's control center. "We need to reroute power from the secondary systems," he ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "If that shield fails, we're all dead." The battle for Earth and the solar system had reached a critical juncture. As the newly developed molecular disruptor was rushed into position, the Allied forces braced themselves for what could be their final stand against the behemoth threat. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, with victory or extinction only moments away. The Allied forces steeled themselves for the next phase of the battle, knowing that the outcome would determine the fate of humanity. As the newly developed molecular disruptor was rushed into position, a tense silence fell over the command centers on Earth and in orbit. Dr. Allen's voice crackled over the comms, her tone a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Molecular disruptor is online and ready to fire. All systems green." Admiral Zhang Wei nodded, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Target the lead Omega Behemoth. Fire when ready." The molecular disruptor ship, a sleek vessel dripping with advanced technology, maneuvered into range of its massive target. Energy built up along its primary emitter, crackling with potential. Then, with a blinding flash, a concentrated beam of energy lanced out, striking the Omega Behemoth dead center. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The behemoth's outer layers began to shimmer and destabilize, its biomechanical structure visibly deteriorating under the assault. Patches of its armor flickered and faded, revealing vulnerable inner tissues. "Direct hit," Zev called out, his voice rising with excitement. "The behemoth's structural integrity is failing." Admiral Nelson leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he analyzed the data streaming across his display. "This is our chance," he said, his voice carrying the weight of command. "All ships, concentrate fire on the weakened areas. Let's bring this monster down." The Allied fleet sprang into action, ships maneuvering into attack formations. Energy weapons and missiles streaked towards the Omega Behemoth, each impact further destabilizing its structure. The massive entity writhed, its movements becoming erratic as it struggled to maintain cohesion. Seizing the initiative, Nelson turned to his tactical officer. "Prepare a squadron for wormhole transit. We're going to hit them from behind." Within moments, a group of Earth's most agile fighters disappeared into the swirling vortex of the wormhole. They emerged behind the Omega Behemoth swarm, catching the entities completely off guard. The fighters unleashed a barrage of fire, their weapons now significantly more effective against the destabilized behemoths. On Mars, Major Hawkins and his team worked feverishly to stabilize the shield generator. Sweat beaded on their foreheads as they rerouted power and reinforced critical systems. "Divert power from sectors 3 and 4, Hawkins ordered, his fingers flying over the control panel. "We need to boost the output by at least 20%. Lieutenant Chin nodded, her own hands a blur of motion. "Redirecting now. Shield strength increasing. We're at 95% capacity and climbing." The shield surrounding Mars and Earth pulsed with renewed energy, its protective barrier growing stronger by the second. Behemoth energy attacks that had previously threatened to breach the defenses now dissipated harmlessly against the reinforced shield. With the immediate threat to the planets reduced, Hawkins turned his attention to the Gamelin manufacturing facilities. "Chun, take a team and start activating the production lines in sectors 6 through 9. We need more molecular disruptors, and we need them yesterday." Back on Earth, Dr. Allen and Dr. Zarkon huddled over their workstations, their minds racing as they refined the molecular disruptor technology. Holographic models of the weapon floated before them, components shifting and reconfiguring as they worked. "If we adjust the focus array," Zarkon mused, his blue fingers manipulating the hologram, "we could potentially reduce the overall size by 30%. Dr. Allen's eyes lit up with understanding. "And if we recalibrate the power distribution." She input a series of commands and the holographic model shrank further. "We could fit this onto our smaller ships." As they worked to miniaturize the weapon, the orbital command station buzzed with activity. Aurora and Paul, their bodies now a seamless blend of human and machine, directed the nanobot swarms with unprecedented precision. The microscopic machines formed intricate defensive patterns around key installations, intercepting and neutralizing smaller behemoth units that managed to slip through the Allied lines. In the heat of battle, the Gamma Behemoth began to shift its strategy. The massive entity pulsed with energy, distorting the space around it. Gravitational waves rippled outward, threatening to disrupt the Allied fleet's carefully coordinated formations. Admiral Zhang Wei's voice rang out across the command channel. "All ships, initiate evasive pattern delta. Maintain fluid formations and adjust for gravitational anomalies." The Allied fleet responded swiftly, breaking into smaller, more maneuverable groups. Ships darted and weaved through the distorted space, their pilots pushing their vessels to the limit to maintain coherent attack patterns. On Earth, Director Marcus Keller stood before a bank of monitors, his face set in fierce dedication. "Launch the stealth satellites," he commanded. "Establish a defensive perimeter around the solar system." A series of sleek, nearly invisible craft detached from orbital platforms, their engines pulsing softly as they moved into predetermined positions. Each satellite carried a miniaturized molecular disruptor, creating a web of defensive points capable of engaging behemoth threats at extreme range. As the battle raged on, long-range sensors detected a new development near the Gamma Behemoth. The colossal entity's outer layers began to shift and reconfigure, its surface becoming more angular and metallic. Large, cannon-like protrusions emerged at various points, giving it the appearance of a massive, living battleship. Admiral Nelson, observing this transformation, knew they had to act fast. He turned to his senior staff, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We need to strike at the heart of this thing before it completes its transformation. I'm proposing a high-risk operation. A small team deployed via wormhole directly onto the surface of the Gamma Behemoth." The command center fell silent as the implications of this plan sank in. It was audacious, potentially suicidal, but it might be their only chance to end this threat once and for all. Admiral Zhang Wei's face appeared on the main view screen, his expression a mixture of concern and grit. "It's a significant risk, Nelson, but at this point, I don't see that we have much choice. You have my authorization. Assemble your team." As preparations for this daring mission began, the Gamma Behemoth's transformation accelerated. Its surface bristled with weaponry, energy building up in its newly formed cannons. The Allied forces braced themselves for the next phase of the battle, knowing that the outcome of this mission would likely determine the fate of Earth and its allies in the face of the relentless behemoth invasion. Admiral Nelson's gaze swept across the faces of his assembled team, each member handpicked for this audacious mission. The specially modified stealth ship hummed with energy, its sleek form barely visible even at close range. "This is it," Nelson said, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We're about to attempt something that's never been done before. Our target is the Gamma Behemoth itself. We'll use the wormhole network to get close, then deploy our molecular disruptors at key points on its surface. Any questions?" The team remained silent, their expressions a mixture of persistence and focus. Nelson nodded, satisfied. "Then let's move out." As the stealth ship prepared for wormhole transit, the battle outside reached a fever pitch. The Allied fleet, now armed with miniaturized molecular disruptors, engaged the Omega Behemoths with renewed vigor. Ships darted and weaved through the chaos, their weapons lancing out to strike at the massive entity's weak points. Admiral Zhang Wei's voice crackled over the comms. "Nelson, you're clear for transit. Good hunting." The stealth ship slipped into the swirling vortex of the wormhole, emerging moments later in the shadow of the Gamma Behemoth. The sight that greeted them was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The colossal entity had completed its transformation, its surface now a maze of metallic protrusions and weapon emplacements. It looked less like a living creature and more like a planet-sized battleship. "Activating cloaking systems," the ship's pilot announced, her fingers dancing over the controls. "We're invisible to their sensors. For now." Nelson leaned forward, studying the tactical display. "There," he said, pointing to a series of locations on the behemoth's surface. "Those look like primary power nodes. We'll target those first." The stealth ship glided silently through the Gamma Behemoth's formidable defenses. Massive energy beams and swarms of smaller entities crisscrossed their path, but the ship's advanced cloaking technology held firm. As they approached the first target, Nelson turned to his team. "Prepare the first molecular disruptor. We'll have to work fast. Each deployment risks compromising our position." The ship's airlock hissed open, and a team member in a high-tech EVA suit pushed off, guiding the molecular disruptor towards its destination. With practiced precision, he secured the device to the behemoth's surface and activated it. The effect was immediate. The area around the device began to shimmer and destabilize, the behemoth's biomechanical tissue breaking down at the molecular level. A low tremor ran through the massive entity, barely perceptible but unmistakable. "One down," Nelson said, his eyes already on the next target. "Move to the second location." As Nelson's team continued their daring mission, the battle raged across the solar system. On Mars, Major Hawkins and his crew pushed the shield generator to its limits, the protective barrier glowing with intensity as it deflected wave after wave of behemoth attacks. In Earth orbit, Aurora and Paul directed the nanobot swarms with unparalleled precision. Their shared consciousness allowed them to anticipate and counter the behemoth's moves with lightning speed. "Something's changing," Aurora said, her voice a blend of excitement and concern. "The behemoths. Their movements are becoming erratic." Paul nodded, his eyes unfocused as he processed the data streaming through their shared neural network. "It's not just here. The effect is spreading throughout the system." On Earth, Dr. Allen and Dr. Zarkon worked feverishly, their lab a whirlwind of activity. Holographic displays flickered with streams of data as they analyzed the latest readings from the battle. "There!" Dr. Allen exclaimed, pointing to a specific energy signature. "Do you see it, Zarkon? That frequency. It's consistent across all behemoth units." Dr. Zarkon's eyes widened with understanding. "A control signal. If we can disrupt it, we might be able to neutralize the entire invasion force," Dr. Allen finished. They quickly relayed their findings to Director Keller, who wasted no time in mobilizing Earth's resources. "Reconfigure the global defense grid," he ordered. "I want every transmitter we have broadcasting that counter frequency within the hour." As Earth's defenses reoriented to emit the counter signal, Nelson's team on the Gamma Behemoth planted their final molecular disruptor. The massive entity's surface was now riddled with zones of molecular instability, its once impenetrable armor now vulnerable. "All charges set," Nelson announced, his voice tense. "Initiating synchronized detonation in 3, 2, 1. The molecular disruptors activated simultaneously, their combined force sending shockwaves through the Gamma Behemoth structure. Massive fissures opened across its surface, releasing bursts of energy as internal systems began to fail catastrophically. "We've done it," Nelson said, allowing himself a moment of relief. "Now, let's get the hell out of here." The stealth ship's engines flared to life, propelling them away from the dying behemoth. As they entered the wormhole network, the Gamma Behemoth imploded behind them, the shockwave barely missing their ship as they emerged safely on the other side. The destruction of the Gamma Behemoth, combined with the counter-frequency now pulsing from Earth's defense grid, triggered a chain reaction throughout the behemoth forces. Omega behemoths began to lose cohesion, their structures breaking down rapidly. Smaller units drifted aimlessly, cut off from their controlling influence. As the last behemoth threats dissipated, a wave of disbelief, followed by jubilation, swept through the Allied forces. Admiral Zhang Wei's voice, usually so composed, trembled slightly as he addressed the fleet. "All ships, stand down from combat operations. Initiate final sweep protocols. I repeat, we are standing down from combat operations." The solar system, moments ago a maelstrom of chaos and destruction, fell into an almost eerie calm. As the dust settled, the full scope of their victory began to dawn on the defenders of Earth and its allies. They had faced an enemy of unimaginable power and emerged victorious. But even as the first celebrations began, questions arose. What would this victory mean for the future of Earth and its newfound allies? How would they rebuild from the devastation wrought by the behemoth invasion? And what other threats might lurk in the vast, unexplored reaches of space? As these questions swirled, the heroes of the battle, from the frontline fighters to the brilliant scientists, knew that their work was far from finished. The defeat of the behemoths marked not an end, but a beginning, the dawn of a new era for humanity and its place among the stars.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.